Before I start the video, watch Chapter 1 in Moonfiction's channel. This is just a continuation and the link for Moonfiction's channel will be in the description down below. Anyways, I did not make this fanfic, support the author in the link below. Angel on My Shoulder by Tealeafcustom. Chapter 10, Midgard Part 2. Notes. Hello, dear reader. Now that the first major arc, Lost Souls, is complete, here is the start of the second arc, which will take place alongside the sports festival. Poster for the first arc is also here. I should have put it at the end of the previous chapter. Ugh. Oh well, here it is. Enjoy my amateur editing skills. Hey. DeviantArt link here if you want the full-sized version. The link will be in description below. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Part 1, Lost Souls, complete. Part 2 start. Izuku was tired, exhausted as he dragged his feet towards the school entrance. His body still ached from the strenuous training from yesterday. His mind was reeling to keep up with everything that had happened today in ectoplasm's math class. That was the price to pay for being in one of Japan's most prestigious academies. If he didn't know any better, he could have sworn that this was divine retribution for blasting ectoplasm into pieces. Well, his clones, but it sort of counted too. Despite his intimidating appearance, ectoplasm was actually one of the most caring and friendly teachers around, and every time Izuku was near he felt a small pang of guilt for deceiving the man. Slowly but surely the boy dragged himself to the UA barrier, only to find someone waiting for him. Sup, Aniki. His gaze rose to find a teenage girl his age looking up at him from her phone, her eyes a window into lush forests. Long locks of curly alabaster hair hid the minute, ivory horns that occasionally peeked out from her temples. Whereas Kiri had a stoic, cold look as her default expression, this girl's face seemed to be locked in a perpetual scowl until she smiled, the negativity in her features melting away to reveal hidden beauty beneath. She was dressed in a dark gray jacket paired with a simple pair of denim jeans, the masculine outfit heavily contrasting that pretty, girlish face of hers. Izuku quickly realized those were his clothes she was wearing, or at least, copies of them. If he wore that he looked like a dork, but somehow she made it work, exuding an air of attractive confidence. In fact, she reminded him of those popular delinquent girls that were always at the top of the social food chain. A far cry from a bottom feeder like him. "Hi, Mimi." He began slowly, a bit cautious. "That is you, right? The one and only? Now you're the one who's nervous around me, eh, Aniki?" She smirked and put her hands on her hips proudly. "Haha. How the turns half-tabled. Turn. Tables. Table turn." The girl paused, blinking for a moment then sulking at her verbal fumble. "I'm not very good at this, am I?" she admitted. "Well, I like you just the way you are." Izuku stifled a giggle. "Flattery will get you nowhere, dear brother." Mimi grinned, giving him a light punch on the shoulder. "But enough about me. How are you? Expecting another happy misunderstanding? Don't remind me." Izuku groaned, before smiling softly. "I'm actually glad to see you." "Ha. Rough day at school, I see." "Like you wouldn't believe. Did anything interesting happen during your patrols?" "You know." She shrugged nonchalantly. "The usual." They walked together, with her asking him about his day and giggling at the meeting he had with the 1B girls. She had made a few sly remarks about his supposed popularity that sent him blushing up a storm, teasing that he was trying to form a harem of sorts. The topic soon turned to her new teenage form, Izuku noting that she was the same height as Kiri's teenage form. "It's not bad. Don't get any loss of control or power despite the size," she muttered, demonstrating by allowing thin ribbons of flame to curl between her fingers. "This new form is my own body and not a projection that I puppet, but it still feels a bit strange when I look in the mirror." "You look great," he tried. "That wasn't what I meant." She sent a wry smile his way and tossed her hair back. See the resemblance? Of course she had already realized it. She had done her homework, after all. Those horns and that long, curly hairstyle. His sister looked like a younger, teenage version of Mount Lady. Izuku admitted, voice almost a whisper. "Yes." Mimi nodded. "To be precise. Yu Tokoyami. This world's version, anyways." Was a little surprised at first, but, I kinda like it. "You do?" "Yeah. I mean, it's kinda symbolic, I guess. She skipped towards him, those familiar red shoes tapping lightly against the ground. Somehow, someway, Yu's legacy lives on through me. I would call it her spirit haunting me, but that's a bit too dark. A meta-echo, perhaps? It would explain why Kiri looks like her, and why we get along so well. Like pieces of a puzzle. A meta-echo, he repeated, tilting his head. Some sort of dimensional black magic fuckery that's going on. A sort of zeitgeist, constants and variables yet again. Her eyes turned serious for a moment before she shrugged. It is possible that there is always a Midoriya Izuku, and there is always a partner. The names and faces might change, but the general idea, the concept of such individuals existing throughout different timelines and worlds is true. May was able to tell me that much. Fascinating, Izuku mumbled, suddenly nose-deep in one of his notebooks and scribbling wildly. The theory that a concept can stretch along different universes, alternate versions and realities that are similar, yet vastly different. You're your own person and not a substitute. Yes, but some of the original Tokoyami's traits and features have carried over to both you and Kiri. I wonder if alternate. His thoughts soon turned to the endless expanse that must exist beyond their universe. Hundreds of millions of realities, each with their own stories to tell, their own histories that diverted from the one he knew. He found himself mumbling incoherently again, contemplating what ifs and if onlys until Mimi giggled. You're doing it again, Aniki. Alright, Izuku snapped the book shut, returning his full attention to her. Wanna get something to eat? Ba-chan already cooked something up. She smiled, slipping her hand onto his like it was the most natural thing in the world. Your favorite katsudon? He asked, eyes lighting up to her amusement. Awesome. You're such a dork, Daddy, she said slyly, her expression melting into a warm smile. But that's the part about you I like the most. Together the two siblings began to walk home hand in hand, the feeling reminding Izuku of all the times he'd held his mother's hand as a child. Warm nostalgia flooded through him until a needle-thin spike of poisonous fury lanced over his mental connection, Mimi looking over her shoulder with a somewhat irritated expression. Her palm crackled, tiny green embers manifesting upon her fingertips. What's wrong? He asked worriedly, nearly turning his head back until she squeezed his hand tighter. That white-hot flash of anger faded away almost instantly, replaced by the familial love she had for him twofold. Her arms wound themselves around his protectively and hugged him tighter, those mysterious flames extinguished within a second. Nothing. Just saw something I really didn't like. Huh? In other news, wanna guess what Kiri-chan did with Ba-chan today? They were looking through old photos of you as a kid, she said, changing the topic effortlessly. You were so cute and your little All-Might Hode tilde. Hey. I thought Mom said that she wouldn't show anyone. Was it All Might Jr., Mighty Boy, or Captain Might? It's all three of those, actually, he admitted, cheeks spontaneously combusting. Wait a minute, she showed you that too, the whole collection, Aniki. She smirked, voice teasing. Including that embarrassing snapshot of you at the Christmas party, gah. While the two siblings slowly disappeared from view, a trio of figures finally peeked out from behind a wall, still startled from how Mimi had managed to spot them behind their near-perfect cover. Ochako, Jiro and Momo looked around nervously, letting out small sighs of relief until they realized what had just happened. Slowly, they edged around and scouted the area, making sure their targets were long gone before deciding to speak. I do believe we are in quite the predicament. No shit. She caught us spying on them. Ochako squeezed her hands together worriedly, eyes wide and frantic. We weren't supposed to be seen. What are we gonna do? Calm down, everyone. Momo tried. Calm down? Did you see that glare she gave us? Jiro scoffed, folding her arms. Jeez. Her expression practically said back off. That girl looked like a delinquent, for crying out loud. A delinquent? Ochako stammered. She had only heard of such mythical figures in anime and manga, never having expected to see one in real life. That pale girl had pretty much met all the criteria of being one, Ochako still remembering the venomous glare that was sent their way. They weren't actually close enough to hear the pair's conversation, but she had heard snippets of that girl's voice and, more importantly, her tone. Deku's companion looked as soft and beautiful as an angel but spoke and articulated herself like a guy. She was a brutish tomboy that somehow looked more feminine than some of the cuter girls Ochako knew. But what if Deku-kun was being bullied by her? She considered the thought for a moment before quickly dismissing it. He looked fine, perfectly relaxed at that other girl's presence. Comfortable, even more comfortable than he is with you. Now, Jiro-san. It's not nice to judge a book by its cover, Momo said sagely, head held high. Sure, she might look and sound a tad rough, but she seems to be very friendly with Midoriya-san if you ask me. Yeah, a little too friendly, Jiro said dryly. It's like my image of him was wrong from the start. What if? Ochako began, her gaze nailed to the floor in guilt. What if Deku-kun gets mad at us for spying on him and his lady friend? Oh, I knew I shouldn't have but hey, you're his friend so you're concerned about him too, right? Jiro's ears circled around in the air lazily to point at the gravity-defying girl. Chillax. Don't think of it as spying, you're just looking out for him. You know, especially with that meek personality of his. Who knows what trouble he might get into. Regardless, I believe we have seen quite enough. Momo coughed and clasped her hands together. Does anyone want to go for some pancakes? Count me in. Jiro shrugged. Ochako simply nodded and followed closely behind them, her mind still reeling from everything she had witnessed. Perhaps the Deku-kun she knew wasn't his true self? Maybe he was hiding the real him from both her and Iida-kun? All these questions and uncertainties piled up within the girl, and she found herself wondering why there was a tightness in her chest. There was also an undeniable feeling of guilt, like she was betraying her friend's trust by doing this. All she wanted was for him to be alright, so why? Why did she feel like? The girl shook her head. Deku-kun was her friend. And friends have to look out for each other, especially if they were in trouble. She doubted that he was a playboy who messed around with the feelings of others, but still. Eyes, now fire. It seems there was more than meets the eye with her green-haired classmate. She would get to the bottom of this mystery eventually. Fire Queen. Ochako thought, giving the other unnamed girl a formidable title that fit her status. I'll remember you. Come on, kid. Up, 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 down, 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 lower. Is that the best you got? Move it or lose it. Step it up, speed bump. Faster, faster. Those were some of the tamer things that Izuku heard while training under Johnny and Misha, the latter of which opted to simply observe for now. Johnny, on the other hand, sing, boy. Sing. Johnny screeched, easily keeping pace with the jogging teen by flying alongside him like some sort of demonic harpy. I wanna be a rescue ranger, I wanna lead a life of danger. Izuku's only response was to let out another wheezing breath. The circuit training that the two men were currently putting him through was carefully designed not to overwork him, but to push him to the limits. The boy's chest burned, the muscles in his legs screaming for help. It was after 30 minutes of yelling and wheezing when they finally took a break, the lankier man attempting to give Izuku a pat on the back. Attaboy. For a run, you're doing great. After this we'll have a few more circuits, then Big Red over there will take over. Come on kid, you can do this. Hey alright. Yeah. I can do this, I'll win. The boy said tired between breaths, until his eyes lit up. Just like Kachon. Johnny's smile vanished off his face, replaced by a rapidly deepening frown. Kachon. You mean ol' explodey boy? You wanna be just like him, right? Yeah? Izuku said, as if it was obvious. When I think of victory, he's the image that comes to mind. Wrong answer. Johnny snarled and sent a palm through the back of Izuku's head, causing the boy to flinch. What was that for? Izuku asked, blinking and momentarily stunned. You could have hit me with that if you were corporeal. I would have smacked you. If I hit you, you'd be broken. The man said curtly. That kid, need I remind you, is a bully. If you ask me, he's a punk with a power complex and an inflated ego, thinking he's better than everyone else. He ain't no image of victory or whatever, don't look up to him. That's not true, Izuku exclaimed. Kachan's a little rough around the edges, but that's just his personality. He's amazing, he's always so strong and he always wins, and he always treats you like trash. Is that what your image of a hero, of a symbol of victory is supposed to be? Someone who only cares about winning? Someone who tells others to dive off rooftops? Izuku's heart sank at the memory. How did you think? Your sister, she can feel everything you feel if the emotions are strong enough. How did you think she felt that day? There was a pit of emptiness in his stomach as he realized that. All this time, whenever he'd felt humiliated or inferior, Carrie had felt what he felt. A part of him was suddenly filled with regret at how he had let it happen unknowingly. Sure, she was an emotion eater, but still. There must have been times where she had been upset. Look, young Midoriya. I know you two might have known each other as kids, but those times are over. That guy doesn't like you, in fact, he hates you. Johnny sighed, bending down a bit to meet his eyes. I mean, this is the same guy who accused you of latching onto him when he was the one who kept messing with you. I've seen it through your memories, and I'm not sorry for it. But Kachan's my friend. He constantly reminds you of your inferiority, came up with an insulting nickname, and found your misfortune when everyone thought you were quirkless amusing. This guy bullied you through the course of your entire school life, was the direct cause of you not having any friends, never hangs out with you ever since you were kids, and still talks trash to you even now. You're delusional if you think he's your friend. In fact, your obsession with him is pretty damn creepy, boy. I don't know how you do things here, but in my home state bullying the quirkless and disabled is looked down upon. If anything, he sees you as a punching bag. Did you forget how he nearly killed you during that training battle? I think you're overreacting, the boy cried. You know what I think? I think you need to stop being such a little bitch. He ain't your friend, stop putting him on a goddamn pedestal. Johnny fumed, the volume of his voice increasing with every word. Why in the world would you idolize someone who has bullied you for 10 years? The hell is wrong with you? No male role model in your life, is that it? The man did not mince or sugarcoat his words, each accusation stabbing into Izuku like a flaming arrow. Deep down a part of him knew this was a well-deserved scolding, but that didn't stop him from being bitter. They didn't understand. Kachan was his friend. Kachan always wins. He was the very image of victory. I've known Kachan all my life. You don't know anything about him, so, I don't need to know anything about him. I was him. Johnny interrupted the boy, who just looked confused. I used to be just like that. I loved the validation of being at the top. The praise and glory that came with it. But deep down I was insecure, and I knew that praise was the only thing keeping my ego afloat. Real kick in the head when you get out in the real world and find out that you're not special, just mediocre. Only managed to figure out what a scumbag I was when my best friend gave me the talk. Izuku blinked, grimacing and unsure of what the man was trying to say. That didn't sound like Bakugo at all. He suspected Johnny was having one of his episodes, but his words began to reveal an ugly truth Izuku didn't want to see. Being a hero is more than just beating up villains and winning the day. Here's a tip, winning ain't everything. Tell me, young Midoriya, why did you want to be a hero? This isn't a game anymore, not when you hold the power of 8 generations within you. If you can't overcome this, you won't be able to meet the future head-on. Why are you like this? The boy tried to answer, but the words simply couldn't leave his mouth. He didn't care for fame and glory, he wanted to be just like All Might because, he admired Kachan because. No, that wasn't right. Kachan was an amazing person that was closer to him than All Might. Izuku paused. He'd been comparing Bakugo to All Might? Why? All Might would never torment those weaker than him. All Might would never be so cruel as to humiliate someone he once called a friend. Were he and Bakugo ever friends? There was a flash of clarity and a memory of him as a kindergartner resurfaced, following the blonde like a lovesick puppy. Too blind to see what was coming next. They had been innocent once. Perhaps back then they had been friends. Middle school memories followed shortly. There was no escape as Bakugo followed him now, bullying him through every step of their adolescence. Cruel laughter rang in his ears. Mocking insults and disgusted glares. teeth gritting in pain as Inko applied ointment to his burns. His notebook floating in the water, nibbled at by hungry carp. And Izuku had took it all like a fool. Answer me. Izuku did not. Bakugo is not your friend, get that through your head. He bullies you, belittles you, hates you. Be a man for once and tell him to fuck off. I don't think you understand. You're the one who doesn't understand. The older man interrupted and towered over him. You need to get over your unhealthy obsession with the Bakugo boy, along with this asinine idea of victory. Have you ever wondered why all this time Kiri-chan never did anything about the bullying? Mimi really wasn't happy when she learned about it, you know. Still, she doesn't dare to say it to you, so I'm going to do her a favor and open your bloody eyes. Huh? The anger and indignation Izuku felt was suddenly washed away by concern for his siblings. What are you? I don't. It was you, Johnny whispered, his voice cutting like a knife. Kiri-chan is being influenced by you. You're the one who's holding her back, and it's clear she biased towards you. She has inherited your ideals, your traits, both the good and the bad. She doesn't see anything wrong with what Bakugo is doing because you think the same. Izuku's heart sank like a rock. He had influenced her so much, to the point where she was beginning to think flaunting power over the powerless was okay? To belittle and humiliate someone who was weaker? Dread flooded into his chest, thinking of Kiri growing up to have a personality like that. Cruel, full of arrogance and hubris. A bully. He didn't care what happened to him. But if his sister became that because of him, he would never forgive himself. With that realization came another, one accompanied by the faded memory of a grown woman sobbing at their kitchen table, face buried in her hands. Izuku's heart twisted in his chest. He had been making excuses for Bakugo, the same way his mother had made excuses for his father. I'm gonna nip this thing in the bud. A deep, growling voice snarled. Out by the roots. It seemed that Johnny was truly pissed, seeing as his wings had slithered out of his back like a pair of giant, feathery anacondas. Izuku watched while they twisted and writhed, shifting into bird-like heads. One had pupils like a goat, two diagonal blocks of white rolling down to stare into him. The other had stars for eyes, and looking into them he could have sworn he saw a glimpse of the cosmos. And then they spoke. Voices harsh and distorted. You're supposed to be All Might's successor? Give me a break. What kind of example are you trying to set? I refuse to let the future generation look up to someone who worships his bully. It's disgusting. Admiration is one thing, but the worship of someone who vilifies you is just pathetic. He thinks nothing of you. The red one hissed, its beak inches away from his nose. Are you still going to be the cretin who grovels at his feet, who sings him praises? Wow, Ka-chan's so amazing at everything he does. You sicken me. No respect for yourself or the people that care about you. No guts, no gumption. You are delusional. Stop it. It's not healthy. The blue one said sadly, tone thin and dreamy. You remind me of a battered housewife who just keeps crawling back to her abuser. It's painful to watch. You are setting a bad example for your siblings. If this keeps up they'll think that kind of behavior is acceptable. It is not to anyone. Understand that not everyone is going to like you, and not everyone is going to be your friend. You defy comprehension, with your worship of someone who treats you like human garbage. One who looks down on the disenfranchised and the disabled with contempt. Or perhaps he just hates to see you in particular succeed. Either way, it's sad. You are obsessed. See, now I've got all three of me reprimanding you. Johnny grunted. Look, I'm not ragging on you for no reason. You have to get out of that sick mindset of yours now, or it'll lead to really big problems down the line. Have a little self-respect. You want to be the #1 hero, but no one will accept a #1 who's a goddamn bootlicker, especially one who lets himself get pushed around. You're wrong. You don't understand how Ka-chan feels. Why should I give a damn about how he feels? Why should you? I don't care about him, I care about you. I'm here because I want to help train you into the next symbol. I want you to be better, not worse. Again, Mimi doesn't dare to say this to you for some godforsaken reason, so I'm gonna do it. Hate me all you want, I don't give a shit. If it means helping you in the long run, then think whatever the hell you want to think about me, Boy. Kachans. All three pairs of the man's eyes narrowed dangerously. Kachan, Kachan, Kachan. What, is he your fucking boyfriend or something? And no. Then stop with the bloody pet name, alright? Stop chasing after the respect and approval of someone who doesn't give a rat's ass about you, who never will, Johnny roared, three voices united as one. Stop being such a wimp. Bloody hell, Misha, say something. I do not think boy is worthy of one for all. Izuku could take all of Johnny's yelling and accusations, but that single line from Misha cut through the air and shattered his ego into 1,000 pieces. The boy seemed to deflate, knowing that was partly the truth. How many young candidates with amazing quirks, talents and personalities had been considered by All Might? And yet, he had been chosen. Him, Deku. Dude. That's going a bit too far, Johnny sighed, wing serpents retreating into his back. He needs to hear this now. Even though he has dream of going to hero school, he never trained. Never tried. Got lucky, and ultimate power fell into his lap. The big man rumbled, stepping forward. Like wish fulfillment fantasy. The words cut into Izuku like red-hot knives. Others train from child, where he only hold lofty dream. I tell you why. Because he scared. Because ego shattered. Because he weak. Bullied. Broken child. Because it is proven fact that quirkless is weaker than those with quirk, no matter what. No self-esteem or father figure, so he looked to male friend, looked to All Might. Unrealistic. Everyone tells him he can't do it, that he quirkless, he useless, so he really believed that. Izuku could have sworn he felt terrors at the edge of his vision until Misha stepped right in front of him. You are not them. And you will never be them. The man said softly. So start being you. It was like something inside broke and Izuku felt his knees give, confronted with all his fears and insecurities. The words in his mouth tasted like bitter resentment. I know I'm weak. So was I, Misha said simply. Izuku looked up in confusion. Being weak is no shame. The gentle giant poked a finger at the boy's chest. Staying weak is. I wasn't worthy successor either. Maybe I'm still not. Maybe we'll never be. And that's okay. Izuku's eyes widened, looking up at the large man. You different from All Might. No talent. But you are also not All Might. You are child. And child. The elderly man's purple eyes softened. Can grow. Learn. Change. Become better, stronger. Like seed into plant you must grow, not remain inert. Change. Like difference between rotting and ripening. And what if he doesn't? The other man grumbled. Then he will die, Misha said simply, as if stating what day of the week it was. As each and every wielder has before him. Not All Might, Izuku whispered. No. The man nodded, a hint of sorrow in his gaze. Not All Might. I'm with the big guy on this one. You gotta change, kid. Cut that boy out of your life and move on. Stop that unhealthy way of looking up to someone who hates you, and think of all the people who love you. Your friends. Your family. You have to work harder than ever, both for your sake and theirs. That last part caused Izuku's lip to quiver. Everyone who cared about him and loved him was already right here. Ida. Uraka. All Might. Kiri. Mimi. Mom. Even everyone from One for All. He should have been thinking of them as inspirations, not someone who hated his guts. Not someone who was the direct cause of him being friendless for the last 10 years. Not someone who humiliated him day after day even now. Not someone who trashed his hard work and threw it out the window. Not someone who told others to kill themselves. Not someone like Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku felt something in his chest clench, his breathing turning labored and tight. Though he didn't want to accept it, Johnny was right, it wasn't healthy to be like this. As painful as it was, he had to change. He had to change if he wanted to show everyone a brighter future, for no one would look up to a man who idolizes someone who humiliates him. He didn't feel any need for revenge, no. All he felt was his image of victory shattering and revealing something ugly underneath, someone who hated every fiber of his being and thought of him as nothing more than a pebble in their path. A strange, tranquil emptiness grew within him, and he felt confused. He didn't know how to feel, really. Half of him still couldn't fully accept their words, though it was undeniably the truth. He did have an unhealthy obsession with Bakugo. He didn't need to change. Starting today. Right here, right now. Izuku began hesitantly. Do not cry. Crying won't solve anything. Misha warned. I will try. Izuku promised and sniffed, heart thumping in his chest. To change. There was a long moment where the Goliath stared down at him, piercing eyes almost looking into his soul. Misha finally smiled after a nod, showing pearly white teeth. Good, he said. Attaboy, that's the spirit. Johnny howled with approval. Show me some resolve, boy. Show me your war face. Huh? Izuku mumbled, taken aback. Don't hum me, now's the perfect time to man up. You got a war face. The old hero leaned in close, a roar erupting from his throat. Ah! That's a war face, now let me see your war face. Bullshit, let me see your real war face. You don't scare me, work on it. Their yelling resounded from the beach they'd been training on, turning the heads of a few bystanders. Amongst one of those bystanders a girl with earphone jacks took a quick snapshot, face scrunched up in confusion. A light tinkling filled the air when Mina swung the rustic wooden door open, eyeing the cafe they had found themselves in. The four girls behind her peeked in curiously while the pink teenager strode forward, a greeting already upon her lips. Yo, Kyoka-chan. How's work? The girl with earphone jacks looked up with a flat expression, dressed in the rather professional-looking vest and slacks that her part-time job provided. Business as usual. Paying customers only? She acknowledged them with a nod. A chorus of greetings echoed from the other girls behind Mina, reveling in the cozy atmosphere of the cafe while Jiro led them over to a large table and slid 5 menus over. Ochako looked around, appreciating the surroundings. Fancy. She hoped the food wouldn't be too expensive, especially since she was already on a shoestring budget. Much to the girl's relief, a brief look at the menu dissolved her worries. Hey. Hope you don't mind us. The gravity-defying brunette said shyly. Nah. Business is a little slow these days, so we'll take what we can get. Jiro nodded towards the menus, producing an electronic notepad from nowhere. Welcome to the little song. I recommend the panna cotta if you're looking for something sweet. We serve set meals as well, on page 5. Ooh. Hagakure's voice thrummed with delight. I'll have that and a glass of orange juice. And, a number 12, a number 7 and an ice water, please, Ochako said politely. A number 9 and ice water as well, Karo. Can I have Take your time, Mina-chan. Jiro nodded, stylist whirling between her fingers expertly. What about you, Yamomo? Let's see. Alright, I'll have 2 number 9s. Ochako took this time to think about everything that had happened in the past week. With the announcement of the sports festival everyone was training hard. She had been working on improving her zero gravity as well, even managing to lessen the nauseating feeling of applying it on herself. A number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip. She wondered what events they would have this year. Last year's Gamma mode of Capture the Flag had been amazing to watch, culminating in the grand finale of a King of the Hill style battle that was still talked about. A number 7. 2 number 45s, 1 with cheese. Ochako blinked, drifting out of her thoughts. Momo still wasn't done with her order? The other girls slowly looked away from their phones and turned to the taller teen with some amazement. How in the world was she going to finish all that food, and a large iced tea? Momo finished politely, looking up from her menu to see 5 pairs of worried eyes. Oh. Don't mind me, I did a ton of training over the week so I have to restock the lipids in my body. The lithe girl was a bright pink as she blushed, but Jiro managed to draw attention away from her by looking towards the actual pinky among their friends. You decided yet, Mina-chan? A number 30, don't forget the dip, Mina said cheerfully. And a lemonade. Right. Jiro nodded, swiping to send in their order. So, why the sudden visit? We just wanted to drop by and say hi. Hagakure drummed her fingers across the mahogany table. Nice place you've got. Heard it turns into a bar after dark? Jiro-chan, you can't drink, Ochako gasped. That's for adults. I don't. Another girl, Hitomi-chan, works the night shift with the boss. Jiro explained with a wave of her hand. Ironically, She looks even younger than me. It's amazing how you can work and train for the sports festival at the same time, Karo. The job isn't too demanding and I need money for my music equipment anyways. The girl's earphone jacks shrugged like she did. Pays decent. A bar? How mature, Mina teased. Do they make the waitresses wear maid outfits as well? What kind of establishment do you think this is? Jiro frowned, raising an eyebrow. That's on Tuesdays. The waitress managed to maintain the serious facade for a few more seconds before they all burst into giggles, releasing the tension that was a result of training for the sports festival. After a short while the food was ready, Jiro sitting down alongside her friends for a chat. They found out that the business was usually slow during the day, and better at night when the place turned into a bar. Jiro had even shown them a picture of business at night, with many more customers compared to the empty space they found themselves in. They even got to see a snapshot of Jiro's co-worker who worked as a bartender, a girl that ironically looked young enough to be a middle schooler. Lady Hagakure? Why thank you, Lady Ashido. You guys are still going on about that? Hagakure and Mina turned to find Jiro giving them a mildly amused look, her fingers twirling one of her urjaks about idly. Today they appeared to be indulging in the fantasies of being so-called sophisticated ladies. Naturally, Momo was exempt from this. Of course, Lady Jiro. One must always address their associates while holding the highest regards for etiquette, Mina said in a fancy tone, pinky extending from her cup. Come, let us commune over a crumpet or two. You want some, Kyoka-chan? They're really good, Ochako said happily between bites. Simply exquisite. Hagakure added haughtily, nose upturned. I'll pass, I already ate. Besides, I've got some new information on Midoriya-kun that I managed to gather over the past 2 weeks. You did, Karo? Tsuyu echoed, gulping down her glass of water. I thought you were too busy between training for the sports festival and your job. I was, and I just happened to see him while jogging the other day. Her slim fingers flew across the phone's keypad. Take a look. A chorus of notification alerts and buzzes echoed through the room, each teenager reaching for their own phones. Oh, it's Midoriya-kun. Momo blinked. And he's being coached by 2 older ladies? What? Let me see, Mina exclaimed, abandoning all semblance of sophistication. Whoa, they're hot as well. The tall one's got kind of a motherly feel to her. The other one looks like she's struggling to stay awake. Tsuyu pointed out. She looks a little familiar. Momo tapped her chin thoughtfully. I wonder why. Wow. Hey, perhaps Midoriya-kun likes older women? Hagakure suggested. He does look a bit like the type that cougars would prey on. Mina put a hand to her chin. A tasty little morsel. Maybe. Just the other day Midnight Sensei called him to stay behind after class. Think they had a little fun in private? Jiro teased. Jiro-chan. Relax, Uraka-chan. I'm kidding. Mostly. Ochako's face had turned warm, all sorts of horrible, naughty thoughts running through her mind for a moment before she quickly shut them down. Deku did however spend an awful lot of time with Midnight the other day, to the point where he missed lunch with her and Yuta. I don't think Deku-kun has that kind of interest, she mumbled. I mean, he seems pretty normal to me. Wait, you sent over 2 photos? What's the second one? Mina thumbed her phone, eyes widening. Whoa. The second image was of Izuku training on the beach again, this time with 2 older men instead. They made for strange companions, their height and sheer size dwarfing Izuku's small frame. The burly, macho men seemed to be yelling, or perhaps encouraging him while flexing. Some sort of attempt to get the boy to be more manly, perhaps. But what really drew Ochako's attention was how her friend was shirtless, the high-quality camera of Jiro's phone capturing the hard lines of Izuku's impressive physique. Wide eyes were drawn to sweat-slicked skin illuminated by the morning sun, taking in the angular definition of the boy's torso. Her shy friend was all hard muscle underneath, heavily contrasting his soft facial features. Ochako was never one to care about muscles, and yet she felt her heart rate spike momentarily upon seeing that picture of Izuku, wondering why the room suddenly felt much warmer. Still, she had to admit that he was rather nice to look at. Oh, didn't know he was hiding a body like that. Mina nodded in appreciation, a little pinker than usual. Niiki. These two are as big as All Might. Tsuyu observed. Maybe he swings the other way? Hagakure guessed. Batting for the other team. Jiro took a swig of her beverage like a tired alcoholic. Why is it always the cute ones, huh? Momo asked, not really understanding what they were implying. Why are we talking about baseball again? The naughty thoughts returned and Ochako suddenly found herself standing, a pained wail escaping her lips. No. Everyone turned to look at her with stunned looks, the brunette suddenly wearing a sheepish expression before quickly sitting back down. I apologize, Uraka-chan. I did not realize you had such a strong dislike of the sport. Momo bowed her head respectfully. Wah, no, I mean, that wasn't what I meant, Yamomo. Don't worry about it. Anyway, I'm pretty sure Deku-kun likes girls. Ochako touched her fingertips together nervously. No, I'm definitely sure he likes girls, or else he wouldn't be so nervous around them. I agree with Uraka-chan on this one. Plus, there was that thing that happened during lunch the other day. Hagakure's voice was cut off when invisible hands flew up to cover her mouth, closed seeming to tense. Mina and Tsuyu grimaced. They hadn't actually told the others of their confrontation with the 1B girls yet, wanting to slowly reveal what happened bit by bit. Jiro, Momo and Ochako gazes slowly traversed to face their transparent classmate. You didn't hear anything from me. Hagakure peeped. Too late. Cat's out of the bag, spill the beans, Jiro demanded. Well. Just the other day we saw Midoriya-kun. Hagakure began nervously. Being spirited away by a group of girls from the other class. While the girls were having their sharing session, Izuku was back at Musatafu Beach, being trained by Hiro this time. Now he had finally met everyone who used to wield One for All, but this man was a little different compared to the others. He had introduced himself as a humble civilian, a non-combatant who could only give him advice in matters unrelated to fighting. It was only a while later in their conversation when Izuku finally found out that this man was the first wielder of One for All. At first he had been all amazed and honored to meet the progenitor of All Might's Quirk, but Hiro had calmed him down and reassured Izuku that he was just a normal guy. So far, that seemed to be true. The man had even admitted that Ichikawa Hiro wasn't his real name, but something he came up with waking up as a phantom within One for All. He still remembered his past and family, but his own name had become a lost memory. It was a shame, but he didn't seem too discouraged by the loss. Let's get started with your training, young Midoriya. But first, Hiro coughed, waving his hand. It's time to see things from a different point of view. A stream of scarlet petals erupted from Izuku's forehead, the boy stumbling back a little. He would never get used to that weird sensation. Those embers curled and twisted against each other, melding together to become Coco, who was curled up in a tight ball and sound asleep in her canine form. She looked awfully relaxed, the gradual rise and fall of her chest pressing against the soft velvet pillow she was resting on. Hiro smiled and made his way over, careful not to shock her awake. Coco? Wake up, little one. The man whispered, prodding her side gently. One of Coco's ears lifted up, her nose twitching cutely. Hirou, you smell funny. Is it time for dinner already? No, I'm afraid not. Then let me sleep, please. Coco was having dreams of moon cheese again. The large animal curled into herself, snuggling against her own tail lazily. One day I'll eat that big cheese ball. Now. I can make some cheese for you later. Hiro lightly nudged her again. Come on, we need some of your wisdom. World hard and cold. Pillow soft and warm. The dog said with a contented sigh, sinking deeper into the plush velvet. There, that is Coco's wisdom. Does she really think the moon is made of cheese? Izuku asked, slightly amused. No, but this one time I made a cheese replica for her and she loved it so much. Coco's eyes shot open at the sound of Izuku's voice, looking around blearily until her crimson eyes focused onto his face. A delighted yelp escaped from her upon seeing him, the large canine pouncing forward only to phase through the stunned boy. She then started pacing around him, front paws tapping against the ground excitedly and unperturbed by her apparent intangibility. New master, new master, new master. Ya hello. The massive brown dog trotted up to him, her voice as clear and bright as the sunlit sky. She paced around him happily, tail wagging so fast it became a blur. "Hi, Coco-chan." Izuku began, smiling lightly. "I'm very happy to see you too. She seems to like you a lot, doesn't she?" "We're outside," Coco gasped, looking around at the ocean waves and the seagulls high above. "Outside, outside, outside. I think she's just happy to outside, Hiro-san." Izuku smiled while watching the dog bound across pristine white sands, now full of energy. "Still, I wonder what I can learn from her." "You'd be surprised. She may not look like it, but she's an excellent fighter, Hiro." Coco ran and plopped down before them like a fluffy pillow, wiggling her paws. "I wanna go swimming." "By all means. You don't have to ask me, you know." The thin man nodded. The two watched as Coco tried to dive into the waves, only to come back almost immediately once she realized the water passed straight through her. "Master, Hiro," she whined, ears drooping and disappointed. "The water's invincible." "Intangible." Izuku corrected her gently. "Intangible. I thought you liked beaches." The man smiled. "A beach with no water is just sand." Coco chuffed, putting her front paws on his back and shoulders, rocking back and forth playfully. Even as a dog, she dwarfed him when standing on her hind legs. "Coco no like sand. It's coarse, it's rough, it's irritating, and it gets all over the place." "You don't say," Hiro said patiently as Coco got all over him. "Either way, let's get to work. Would you do the honors?" "Okay. Don't worry, Master. I is professional teacher." "I thought you were a professional food taster," her comrade remarked. "Coco has many talents, Ja," the dog girl said shamelessly. There was a blur of movement when the phantom shifted into human form. This time she was dressed in a sporty outfit consisting of a tank top and shorts, the tall girl doing a few stretches before they started. She held out a hand to her side with fingers outstretched. "Star Stripe," she declared proudly. Izuku waited for something to happen, and nothing did. Coco blinked and started waving her hand around before finally realizing whatever she was trying to do wasn't working. "Oh," she sighed, before instantly brightening. "Oh well. Come on, new master. Use one for all." I'd like to, but then my bones would break." All Might said I wasn't a strong enough vessel yet. "Not yet," Hiro agreed. "But even a fragile glass can hold water." "Yes. A small part, but a part nonetheless." None of the wielders had actually given him a straight answer for how to utilize One for All, wanting him to think for himself. That, and the power that All Might held was vastly different from the previous versions of One for All, making it difficult for them to help. Izuku thought for a while, trying to decipher the meaning behind those words. Nothing about All Might was small. One for All was absolute, power overwhelming. Izuku paused. Wait. Overwhelming? But All Might held all that power naturally without calling upon it? All the time? He thought back to when they had first met, and remembered the number one hero's explanation for his muscle form and his weakened one. It was like a fat man who sucked in his belly at the pool, he had said. That was a metaphor for One for All, wasn't it? That meant that before his injury All Might was keeping the legendary quirk active all the time, 24/7. Was that even possible for him? You're doing that infamous muttering of yours again. But yes, I suppose you're onto something. Hiro smiled. All Might was the strongest of us, and so was his version of One for All. He was able to use 100% of Nana's power the moment he got it, you see. A natural-born genius. Asking you to start with all that power is just unreasonable. Why don't you walk before you fly? So he was supposed to start out small? That made sense. Izuku's thoughts drifted back to the first day of class and the baseball in his grip. All that power focused into one fingertip. He recreated that feeling, focusing on the metaphor he had been chosen. The egg in the microwave. Don't let the egg explode. The inferno that was One for All surged into his fingertip, the boy wincing in response. He focused further, remembering what Hiro had said. A portion, a fraction, a fragment of power. Pain and lightning raced across his arm as he tried to hold back the river of power, feeling it thunder through his flesh and bones like an alternating current. In the end, It was only ever about power and control. They were inversely proportional. More power resulted in less control. So the opposite must be true as well. All he had to do was turn down the heat. Listen to me. One for all bucked against his control like a raging bull, a pressure cooker threatening to burst. It was almost like the quirk itself was testing his worthiness, crackling energy flooding through his body. This power he held within him was simultaneously fire and lightning, everything that the 8 previous wielders were, everything that they could have been, coalescing into a single shape. Luminous arcs of green lighting spilled from his arm, excess power with nowhere to go. You can do it, Izu Master. Coco cheered. Go, go. It's a part of you, young Midoriya. Stay strong. Izuku nodded through clenched teeth, ignoring the building pain in his hand. He started to lower the power bit by bit, like turning the knob of a faucet until the energy trickled into his muscles instead of exploding outward. His focus being sapped by the second, struggling to rein in the lightning. He was Phaethon, trying in vain to control Helios' chariot. The moment he lost focus he would slip and set the world on fire. No. Izuku pushed down the fear, the self-doubt, the insecurity. All Might had chosen him. He had to live up to everyone's expectations. And his own. Reaching inward, he willed the legendary quirk to slow. To stop, and be still. You listen to me now. The lightning diffused with a quiet whine, and Izuku found himself with control over a tiny percentage of its power. It wasn't 5%, nor 3%. It was barely even 1%. But judging by their reactions, it was enough. Coco had a wide, toothy grin on her face while Hiro smiled warmly. Marvelous. The thin man nodded. A tiny bit of the power that you can control. Your body isn't strong enough to withstand a 100%, but 1% will suffice for now. Now take that 1% and let it flow. When, Coco said happily, jagged arcs of crimson lightning erupting from her arms. Izuku nodded in understanding. If One for All was like a flame, it would be apt to use a cooking metaphor. For food to be evenly cooked, the heat had to be spread out instead of being focused in one spot. Like a taiyaki rotating in a microwave. Heat, spreading out evenly across the surface and within. He let that 1% slowly flow through his hand, then his arm, then his body. Wow! Izuku breathed. A thin veil of emerald lightning shrouded him for a moment, the flame of legend warming his skin. It was a heat, a current that connected him to something deeper, something primal. The power of 8 souls, united as one. Coco nodded excitedly, letting her own version of the quirk spark to life again. That's it, that's it. Move like me, move like me. Jump like me, jump like me. She demonstrated, showing Izuku how the red lightning danced across her entire body with every movement. When for all. I don't think he's quite ready for that yet, Coco. But well done, Midoriya-kun. That's a good start. Hiro smiled. Take it step by step, and one day you'll be at a 100%. Like All Might? Perhaps. You have to understand, like I said before, All Might was a 1 in a million genius who could use 100% the moment he received the power. His control over it was impeccable, keeping it on all the time. Eating, resting, working, sleeping. Coco added helpfully. Yes, even that. But here's a tip, young Midoriya. Hiro leaned in a little closer. When he was younger, All Might worked out while having One for All active. Layering strength atop strength, having it on as his muscles recovered. Like the Greek myth of Milo of Croton, who lifted a calf every day. In this case, One for All is the calf. You must grow with it, and become stronger as we all have. I see. So that's why he returns to his skinny form now that he's injured? Izuku guessed, still mostly focused on maintaining his charged state. I suppose so. My version barely even has any power, so I can't really say, Hiro chuckled, a tiny crackle of white lightning escaping his palm. But know that the moment you became All Might's successor the power grew. All Might's strength atop your own. And it will only grow stronger from here on out. Wonderbar. More power, more fun. That remains to be seen. So, young Midoriya, are you up for a test run? Izuku nodded and Coco bared her teeth into a savage grin, making the boy nearly regret his decision. Good. Coco will test your reaction time and control. Do try to dodge, especially when she could punch a hole through you if she were tangible. The one with the sharper fangs win. Izu Master. A bead of sweat rolled down Izuku's temple as the dog girl cracked her knuckles happily. It looked like he was in for a long day ahead. Do you think all the training we did with him helped? There was a soft rustle of paper on wood when Nana slapped a card onto the table as a punctuation to her question. The three other children sitting around her stared at their own cards in turn, contemplating their next moves. Toshinori had been playing earlier but he kept winning and eventually got bored, deciding to practice his cooking in the strange mental world they lived in. Hiro and Coco offered to help. Maybe. We tried to teach his as much as possible but there's no way he'll be able to remember everything. Chen frowned at her full hand of cards, brows furrowed. Not enough time. Hope he does well for the festival. It would do wonders for his self-confidence. Nana placed another card onto the table. Beside her, Misha was glaring at his cards as if they were a cheating wife. Even as a child he was a bit taller and chubbier than the rest of them. Hey, gonna beat you this time, Tubby. Johnny snickered, a roguish grin decorating his young features. In your dreams, bird brain. Are you guys even listening? Nana asked. Uno. The blonde boy yelled, slamming his card down onto the table. Misha cursed, sighing. Why do I even bother? Before the larger boy could retort, a ball of warm fluff and love appeared out of nowhere, landing on their table with a soft flumph. Hello, hello. Guten Tag. Coco comes bearing gifts, made by friends Toshinori. Here, try. The little creature said happily, dropping the basket she had been carrying in her mouth. Kunig, you mutt. Get your dirty paws off the table. The blonde boy screeched. Rude. Coco is certified pedigree. And very clean. The third wielder chuffed and started handing out a quartet of neatly packed cookies. One for you, one for you, one for you. And even one for you, mean yeppins. Humph. Thanks. Johnny grumbled, accepting the treat. Do you even know what the word pedigree means? Chen asked, taking a cookie. Of course, Coco said, voice muffled by the treats already in her mouth until she gulped. Means I know everything about pears. But to be honest, they're not really tasty. Misha squinted at the strange creature on their table, looking confused. Explain your smallness, he said. Impupper. The little puppy beamed at him. Toshinori made these? Nana took a bite. He's getting better. Friend Toshinori went through 12 tries before they became good. When, Coco said happily, ears flopping around when she moved. You'll never know what happened to the rest. Let me guess, you ate them, Chen said flatly. Shock and surprise decorated the puppy's features, turning into awe a moment later. How did you know? Amazing. When Izuku's pen danced on paper like miniature ballerina, the light scratching of words being written accompanied by soft muttering. Though he was exhausted in both body and mind, he still wrote, lines upon lines spiraling into that burnt notebook. It may not look like much, but that little book meant a lot to him. It was the latest of his hero journals, chronicling all his foolish hopes and dreams. But now he actually had the chance to be a hero, and felt the burden of responsibility that accompanied it. This power of his. It was almost like it was given to him, not earned. That was why he had promised to work harder than ever, both to fill All Might's shoes and be worthy of one for all. Taking a break, he glanced over to his younger siblings who were relaxing on the couch. They were playing one of his old video games, All Might's Amazing Adventure. At least now there was a use for the second controller that came with his pre-order edition. To unlock the secret boss Toxic Chainsaw, you need to pick up the thingy and throw it into the other thingy. Mimi chimed, her head moving about animatedly. There, on the left. Your left or my left? Carrie asked innocently, thumbing the controller. We both share the same left. Oh yeah. It was nice to see that they were getting along well without needing him to assist. The boy proceeded to start on his schoolwork, having dedicated most of his time to training. It was only after an hour later when he took a short break to check on his siblings. They were watching TV now, sinking back into the plush leather in comfort. Izuku thought for a moment and made his way over, deciding to spend some time with them. It was moments like this he had to treasure, especially when they were still growing. He slowly sat down in the gap between them, filling up that empty space with the warmth of familial love. Onii-chan. Kiri chirped, snuggling into him. Papa. Mimi nodded, hesitating a tiny bit before doing the same. They sat like that for quite a while, the boy's younger siblings leaning against him quietly while they relaxed. He was living in the moment, acknowledging the cozy warmth in his chest at the thought of a bigger family. Before the two children appeared there was only him and his mother, to the point where they had to take turns cooking dinner just for some variety. His father was. Izuku let the tension flow out of him before the sisters noticed. He didn't like to think about that man. A few more minutes of warmth and cuddling up with his siblings continued until he found Mimi sniffing at a silver package he had handed over to them earlier. It was the chocolate Reiko had gifted to him. He watched as she took a cautious nibble, and was surprised when she stuck her tongue out. Bleh, it's way too sweet. Mimi frowned, then took another bite and stuck out her tongue again. And it tastes like an MRE. Calorie-rich, with that special preservative flavor disguised with sugar. Where did you say you got this, Aniki? An acquaintance gave it to me. Izuku hummed, smiling a little at the unintentionally adorable display. So you can't take things that are too sweet, eh? It's more of the slightly metallic MRE taste. Brings back bad memories. She grimaced. You can have my share, Kiri. I'm going to get something else to eat. Really? Kiri accepted the offering gratefully. Thankies. More time passed as the three siblings continued channel surfing while leaning against each other. Turning to Kiri, he noticed her gaze was sharp and focused, absorbing the TV's information like a sponge. Mimi was now snacking on some peanuts lazily, the occasional plume of fire snaking out of her and forming a ghostly hand to lift snacks into her mouth. Now they were watching a cheesy drama set in an age of pirates and sea monsters, The Black Freighter, it was called. With heroes becoming commonplace, the allure of superhero fiction had diminished, leaving other genres to fill the gap. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll, the handsome main character quoted, his voice a deep baritone. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. Ni-chan. Kiri tugged at his shirt, eyes bright with curiosity. What's that mean? Well, Izuku paused. It means that you are in control of your fate, I guess. You are who you choose to be, Kiri. You decide what you want. Mimi grunted. The little girl blinked and thought hard, then looked to her sibling, or rather, at the bowl in her hands. I want some grilly cheese. Izuku blinked, before his features slowly softened into a loving smile. All right, sweetheart. What about you, dear? I'll have one with peanut butter and, Mimi started, then paused. You know what? I'll make it myself. She followed closely behind as Izuku made his way into the kitchen, looking for the bread they needed. Hey, Papa. Something's been on my mind lately. Mimi spoke up, tiptoeing to reach the countertop. Yeah? You how one for all is a quirk that stores power, right? Augmenting physical prowess to superhuman levels. Two of Aftermath's arms manifested at her side, helping the little girl open a jar. Did you know it augments the user's base quirk as well? Izuku paused, his fingers still poised on the toaster switch. It does? When I used my version of OFA, Aftermath was way faster and more durable, leagues more powerful than without it. Mimi squinted at her bread, applying a thick layer of peanut butter with a practiced motion. If OFA amplifies a quirk's power, shouldn't Kiri be way stronger? Now that you mention it. Yeah. But she doesn't seem any different. Izuku thought back to the news reports of Valkyrie, to the child still lazing on his couch now. She had gotten much stronger over the years, but that was thanks to hard-earned battle experience. Even after he had obtained one for all, Kiri hadn't changed much in terms of raw power. Perhaps it wasn't affecting her? Exiting the kitchen with Mimi, he found Kiri floating in the air, watching TV while upside down. Those bright blue eyes lit up upon seeing the treat he had brought, though her face remained stoic as ever. Grilly cheese, Kiri said eagerly, reaching towards him with tiny fingers. Thanks, Ni-chan. Careful, it's hot. Izuku shushed, gently setting her down beside him. He pondered about his previous thought before simply deciding to ask her. Kiri-chan, he said carefully, catching her in the middle of pulling a long string of cheese with her mouth. Have you felt any Different after I got one for all? NN. The little girl blinked and rolled her shoulders, twisting about to test his theory. Not really. You don't feel that there's a heat inside you, like? Mimi struggled to find the words. A burning flame? Nah. Carrie paused. Something's different in Onii-chan, though. I can feel it. You can feel one for all? Izuku asked in surprise. Sometimes, when you use it. It's all tingly. She nodded enthusiastically. And warm. Like a big, spiky blanket. Huh. Hiro did say that one for all affected different types of quirks in different ways. Maybe it has increased your range, or your durability? Non-direct factors that are hard to spot. I wonder if, Mimi mumbled. When you're mumbling like that you remind me of Onii-chan. It's cute, Carrie said happily. He smiled at her lightly, marveling at how innocent she was. Deep down, she was still a child. And so was Mimi. In fact, their old forms were a reflection of who they truly were. Valkyrie was the blank slate that absorbed all the information she encountered, while Aftermath was the intimidating shell that hid a lonely, frightened girl. Despite everything he loved them both, accepting all their flaws and negativities just like they did for him. For to be human is to be flawed, and all three of them certainly had no shortage of that. Even so, he would have to work hard. For them, for himself, for everyone. Saturday came along like a summer breeze, rolling into Izuku's life before he knew it. Today he was training alone. At least, that's what it looked like to anyone nearby. Two miniature fairies floated above his shoulders, invisible to the naked eye. They had tested it with Inko, and only Izuku was able to see and hear the cloaked form of his sisters before him. It was surprisingly convenient, though he had to admit it felt a bit odd for them to give him snippets of feedback as he trained. It sort of reminded him of those old-school cartoon depictions of shoulder angels and devils, whispering into his ears. Keep going, Onii-chan. Almost there. Carrie cheered, her tiny body bouncing atop his shoulder with every stride. You can do it. You gotta keep your breathing even, Aniki. Mimi puffed out her chest and exhaled, demonstrating. Like this. 1 2, 1 2. Thanks, you too, Izuku said breathlessly, his lungs burning. He had to keep on going, especially since it was almost time for the sports festival. None of the three siblings realized it, but they had drawn the attention of a certain other. While Izuku jogged along a path parallel to the riverbanks, someone else was also jogging in the opposite direction, his tar-black feathers slick with sweat. Fumikage Tokoyami stopped upon feeling a tugging from within his navel, jogging on the spot to preserve his breathing. A quick glance down at his stomach had the moody boy frowned, seeing the glowing yellow eyes of his brother peeking out. Shadows twisted and writhed, the creature wincing and shrinking a tiny bit when it emerged in the presence of bright morning sunlight. Tokoyami cocked his head curiously. Dark Shadow never came out during the morning unless he called for him. Had something garnered his attention? Dark Shadow, what? There. Something familiar. The wraith hissed, one ethereal claw stretching outward. Tokoyami followed his projection's finger, eyeing the green-haired teenager he had pointed at. Midoriya Izuku, the boy in his class with the uncontrollable strength quirk. He was talking to himself as he ran? Some sort of psych-up technique, perhaps. Tokoyami often talked to Dark Shadow when training as well. Yes, of course you would find him familiar. He's my classmate, remember? Tokoyami shrugged. No, not that. Fumikage. Dark Shadow turned to him, an expression of curious excitement upon his features. I see too little. Fairies. It was days later when Izuku found himself slowly shuffling through the hallways, having just exited a meeting with All Might. In his opinion, it hadn't gone well at all. He was about to tell All Might of the situation regarding Valkyrie and One for All, but the number one hero had dropped a bomb on him. One for All was related to All for One. The greatest villain of the Dark Age was the direct cause of One for All, specifically its creation by forcing a quirk onto his then thought to be quirkless brother. Light, born from darkness. Like a pattern repeating itself over and over again. Izuku's gaze swept across the floor. He had been so shocked, so floored by the revelation that he couldn't bring himself to tell All Might what happened to everyone who had once held One for All. pieces of their soul forever bound to that quirk, a cursed immortality that was the price of nearly limitless power. He hadn't been able to tell the man about Nana. It was lucky that both Yui and Mimi were at home right now. He didn't want them to see him in this sad, pathetic state. He felt like such a coward, especially after All Might had said those words while staring at a photo of Valkyrie at USJ taken with Snipe's helmet cam. All Might was many things, but he wasn't stupid. The man had quickly realized there was some sort of connection between Shimura Nana and Valkyrie, but Izuku couldn't bear to tell him what it really was. "Nana? Is that really you?" All Might had asked while staring at the photo, and for a moment he looked sad, gaunt and tired. But quickly sprung back into a strained smile. "But enough reminiscing about the past, young Midoriya. Heroes must look to the future. I wish you best of luck in the sports festival. Remember, I want you to tell the world I am here." The boy clenched his teeth. Nobody had told him about All for One, either. But that was to be expected. He wasn't ready, far from it. He knew that much. Still, it ticked him off. His own ineptness, and the frustration that accompanied it. Izuku sighed, relaxing her shoulder and brows to release some tension. The atmosphere was also charged thanks to the upcoming school festival, something that everyone was looking forward to. He thought back to what Ochako had said earlier, about how she was in the heroics business for money to help her parents. It was an admirable goal, with him finding a newfound respect for her. But with that respect came another realization: what was his endgame in all this? He knew that Ida wanted to follow in his family's footsteps as the next Ingenium when he got older. Ochako had been giving him some weird looks recently, too. Was he the only one without a clear, established goal? Ever since the argument with Johnny he'd been questioning himself on what he wanted to be. He wanted to be just like All Might, but what did All Might truly represent to society? Victory? Power? Justice? A series of small, panicked beeps echoed down the hallway, the welcome distraction pulling Izuku out of his thoughts. At first he thought it was some sort of malfunctioning fire alarm, but when the boy got closer he heard something peculiar. "Help, help." A tiny, barely audible voice wailed. "Help, help." Izuku frowned. Should he go to investigate? Of course he would. He was never one who turned away from someone who needed help, no matter what. Squaring his shoulders, the young hero diverted from his original path and went over to the source of the small commotion, wondering what he would find. It certainly wasn't what he had expected. The green-haired boy rounded the corner only to find one of UA's security bots clutching something round and flailing in its grip. The large, mono-wheeled robot was the same variant the school had used in the entrance exam, the only difference being the word security stenciled along its chest armor. It rotated on the spot to face Izuku, and he got a closer look at what it was holding. It turned out that it wasn't someone who needed help, but something. In its claw-like manipulators the security bot held a smaller, apple-sized pink robot, the spherical little droid struggling to wriggle out of its captor's grip but to no avail. "Help, help, attention. Unauthorized robotic unit. Neutralizing." The green security robot announced, squeezing the smaller pink robot roughly. "Ouch." The pink sphere wailed pitifully. "Ouch." Izuku considered his options for a moment. Was it really worth it to go up to them? He could get reported for interfering with a security bot, especially when it was none of his business. But then the spherical, apple-sized robot let out another monotone wail and Izuku sighed, making his decision. He couldn't help but button when he saw someone being hurt, even if it was a dumb little robot. Striding over, the boy quickly walked up to the larger bot and gently pried its victim out from cold, metallic fingers. The security bots were especially ordered not to interact with students unless there were special circumstances involved, so Izuku managed to retrieve the pink bot with little effort. "Attention. Unauthorized." Yeah, I've got it." Izuku groaned. "Look, I'll take it back to the support department." "Alright? That's probably where it came from." "Understood." The security bot said flatly. The machine paused for a second before speaking again. "Midoriya Izuku, Hero Department. Student ID 000981422387. Incident recorded. Administrative staff have been notified of your transgression with school rules. Izuku felt his eyebrow twitch, slightly annoyed and resisting the urge to make a face at the security bot as it rolled away. Dumb thing was probably controlled by Yui's master control program, something with no true intelligence. After Demon Lords of Banya and Mankiller Brow 1589 world governments banded together to enforce strict laws and regulations on AI technology, to the point where only 13 true sentients still existed in the world. 2 of them were situated in Japan, Disaster Prevention AI Cassandra 4 in Mount Fuji, and Tartaros Warden Supreme. He glanced down at the pink sphere he was carrying. Bots like this one and the security bot were not true artificial intelligences, merely rudimentary programs running a personality protocol alongside their basic functions. "Thankies," the sphere said, somehow managing to sound cute in its monotone, high-pitched voice. "Thankies." Upon closer inspection, Izuku realized what this thing was, having seen them online. A Hero unit. Heuristic Autonomous Robotic Operators, or HRO, were a type of personal assistant bot that were widely used in Europe. They came in a variety of sizes and colors and were often used in ship navigation, heavy engineering, logistics, and other various tasks since they had a dual purpose as powerful mobile PCs. However, the trait that they were most known for was their function as popular toys for kids, especially with their childish speech patterns that were programmed to repeat. Izuku flipped this one over to search for any markings, and was rewarded with several details stamped into its back. Hero Type U, Custom. Property of Hatsume May, Class 1H. If found, please return my baby. Izuku looked at the words for a while before sighing to himself, tucking the bot close to his chest. To the support department it was. Midoriya Izuku. The little robot chirped, its circular ear flaps fanning outward. Midoriya Izuku. "Yes, that's my name," Izuku mumbled, feeling a little weird answering to a machine. "I suppose you heard it from that security bot?" "Yes, yes." "Thankies, Midoriya Izuku. You have saved us. We are eternally grateful, grateful." Hopefully I won't be in too much trouble for saving you. What were you doing out here, anyway? It's a long way from the support department. Haru was exploring. So you were. Izuku smiled tiredly. So it had a name, though a rather uncreative one. Your owner lets you do that, eh? Not really. Haru wants to see the outside. Outside. The little machine wriggled in his arms to face him, its 2 beady little eyes flashing whenever it spoke. But outside is scary, scary. You were programmed with an objective to go outside. Are you a Pathfinder bot? Maybe. Turn left. After a few more minutes of high-pitched lefts and rights, they found themselves at a towering solid steel door, Izuku wondering how to open it as there wasn't a doorknob or slot of any sort. Password. A horrible grating noise reminiscent of an old internet dial-up escaped from the little bot, and soon the gargantuan doors began to slide open by themselves. "Sensei, I still can't find her. Did you think that security nabbed?" A pink-haired girl emerged from behind a pile of metal scrap, eyes widening and rushing towards Izuku with open arms upon seeing him. "Baby." "Wah." That was all he managed to say when the unknown girl crashed into him, laughing maniacally as they both went down in a heap of tangled limbs. Upon opening his eyes, Izuku found himself face to face with the girl, now getting a much closer look at her. Her delighted golden eyes had cross-shaped reticles for pupils, and she was squeezing him so tightly that his face turned red. Or maybe it was because a girl was pressing her body against his. His first real hug had been stolen by a girl he didn't even know. "Ooh, thank you. She picked up Haru and began spinning it around happily, hugging the sphere and giving it a little kiss. "Mwah. My baby. You're okay." Okay. Midoriya Izuku, Hero Department. Rescue. Izuku got up with an embarrassed cough, backing away from the strange girl. She was dressed in a black tank top and workshop overalls, the top half of which was tied haphazardly around her waist. Her salmon pink hair was accompanied by a pair of steampunk-looking goggles, twin prongs curving out their sides. The boy blushed as he looked away, remembering for a moment how soft she felt when she hugged him, especially. His face turned as pink as her hair. She was covered in soot and grease, but her girlish features shone through despite the grime, only amplified by the wide grin she wore when she strode towards him eagerly. This was someone who didn't give a damn about how she looked and still ended up attractive. "So you're the guy that rescued my baby?" The girl smiled, then leaned forward to grab both his hands and began shaking them roughly. "Thank you so much. Oh man, I was so worried that I almost considered hacking into the security mainframe." Izuku managed, fumbling his words and trying very hard not to stare down her top. No problem. Just doing what anyone would do." She continued shaking his hand excitedly, and Izuku couldn't help but blush like a schoolgirl. A really pretty girl was holding hands with him. He barely registered that she tilted her head back to call someone else in the other room. "Zenith, we found her. Yorimoto's back." A small silver sphere floated out of the adjacent room, beady eyes flashing pink. Emoto. Haru's ear flaps rose again in acknowledgement, floating towards her fellow droid. Nisama. In their rushed excitement, the two little robots bumped into each other midair, eyes flashing again in surprise. Ouchies. Izuku blinked at the strange display. Was the whole support department this whimsical? "Allow me to introduce myself." The girl finally let go and did a crisp salute. "Hi, I'm Hatsume May. Nice to meet ya." "I'm Midoriya Izuku. And nice to meet you too," Izuku said, rubbing his head nervously until it clicked. "Wait." He looked at her again, really looked at her, and his vision blurred for a split second. The tall woman with the prosthetic arm and eye from Mimi's memory overlapped her form. This was Hatsume May, the one who took care of Mimi. At least, she was this world's version. Izuku gulped. This was the girl who would one day grow up with the knowledge to traverse dimensions. Then she smiled with that big earnest grin and all his concerns floated away. May got up in his face again, golden eyes gleaming with delight. Hey. Since you're here and all, how about a tour of the workshop? I mean, you are from the hero department after all. I sense that we'll be working together closely in the near future. I'd love to, but I still haven't eaten lunch. Oh. Then I guess I'll have to feed you. Come on." "What?" Izuku was once again taken by surprise when she took his hand, dragging him into the back room happily. It seemed that May was someone that marched to the beat of their own drum, and Izuku was frozen as he again realized he was holding hands with a girl. Carrie and Mimi were his siblings, so it was natural for them, but the way this girl's fingers interlocked with his even through her thicker gloves, it made his heart beat faster just a tiny bit. That was just how innocent he was. "Zenith, take your sister back to diagnostics and make sure she's alright. Also, get Laserbeak to cancel his search, RTB." May instructed her silver robot. "We'll postpone the touch-ups on Aerosmith." Roger. You don't really need to do this, Hatsume-san. Treating you to lunch is the least I could do for you. This is also an opportunity to show off one of my newest babies." "Babies?" Izuku asked blankly, only to be interrupted when a mechanical falcon rocketed into the room through an open window, circling overhead before landing on May's arm. "Laserbeak, good boy. Right, here's the charging cable," she crooned, setting the bird robot down and plugging a wire into its back. Izuku blinked, then leaned forward with renewed interest and sparkling eyes. "Is that an AE-19 Red Wing? The very same type used by the Hero Falcon?" he asked excitedly, his passion in heroics reigniting. "Oh, you're a smart cookie." May grinned, fists pumping with equal excitement. "You're pretty close, but this one's actually a custom frame based on the Red Wing series that I had to build from scratch. Machined the parts myself." "You made this?" Izuku gasped, looking back at the robot bird, then at May. "That's awesome." "I know, right?" the support student said cheerfully. "I'd like to think I improved it, too. The baseline Red Wing models always had an issue with overheating that I solved with a secondary drive unit that also functions as an auxiliary heatsink, allowing for a near-perfect feedback loop," Izuku observed, peering at the machine's bulky back. "That's one of the solutions proposed by the Sky High-Tech hero, El Condor. But would that get in the way of the transformation cog?" Figured it out ages ago, dude. Just have to relocate it onto the docking station, they said at the same time, May's eyes growing wide. Izuku flushed, gaze nailed to the floor. He'd done it again, hadn't he? His passion for heroism of any form always radiated from him like a dying star going supernova, overwhelming others around him. Now this person would think that he was just a weird hero otaku. Sorry. I got a bit too excited. He was interrupted by his own squeak when May grabbed his hand again. You. Make a baby with me. Now, she demanded, a mad gleam of determination in her eyes. She continued dragging him to the back room even as his mind struggled to comprehend what he'd just heard. Despite all his strength, he somehow couldn't struggle against her iron-hard grip. Baby? What are you talking about, Hatsume-san? He protested, blushing all the while. Midoriya-kun. The moment I laid my eyes upon you I knew you were my dude, May said nonchalantly. I'm gonna let you into my special workspace where we'll make a baby together. We barely even know each other. You need your eyes checked. Nonsense. I have special eyes. Then look with your special eyes. I think we're a little too young for BBB. He managed to force the words out through his overwhelming embarrassment. Baby making. Don't be ridiculous. No one's too young to experiment. Izuku stammered, watching as May reached for a curtain that blocked them off from the next room. He began to panic. May was a very pretty girl and all, but shouldn't there be a few steps before he made it this far? With the wonders of technology, May flung the curtain open and revealed machinery. All sorts of strange devices and tools were laid across the entire room, attached neatly on the walls and even hanging on the ceiling. In the center of it all was a surprisingly clean workbench that clearly belonged to May, seeing as another pair of her distinctive goggles was disassembled atop it. Izuku forgot the prior embarrassment he had held a moment before, taking it all in with a sense of wonder. This was the support department. So many support items for heroes. The inner fanboy in him could have squealed with delight. He quickly remembered May was still beside him and composed himself. Babies. By babies you meant your inventions? He said with relief. That's right. My beautiful, pretty little babies, May said happily, flinging her arms wide. Made them all myself. Izuku's eyes grew wide. All of it? There were dozens, possibly hundreds of gadgets in this room. Wow. He breathed. You're amazing. The boy realized what he'd just said a moment later and turned into a Christmas tree, green and glowing bright red. I didn't mean to. No, don't look at me. Look at my babies. May chided, gesturing to the room. They're the amazing ones. It was a few seconds before Izuku remembered how to breathe. They are. Sorry to disappoint but I don't really have any experience in engineering or robotics so I can't make any babies with you. He admitted. That's okay. I just need some ideas from you, my dude. That counts as baby making too. May clapped her hands together and a table unfolded itself from the ceiling. Baby 5555. I need you. A strange spider-like robot with a bulbous, swollen body creeped up onto the table, causing Izuku to nearly recoil. It had been fast, and the way it moved with those 8-pointed legs was way too realistic. May sat down at the table. So did he, eyeing the spider bot warily the whole while. He considered running away but the queue for the cafeteria was probably too long by now, so he might as well let May enjoy herself. About that lunch I mentioned. May gave the robot a strong pat. This baby will create a hot meal from whatever preset recipe and ingredients you put in it. A mobile lunch rush? He tried not to flinch when the spider scuttled around the table like some unholy mix of machine and nature, setting the plates and utensils for them. Once done it let out a quiet ding like a microwave, the abdomen section opening up and depositing the food onto their plates, some sort of reddish soup with a generous amount of sour cream. The way it deposited it wasn't very appealing, to say in the least. Go on, May urged him eagerly. Try it. Izuku gulped. How had he gotten into another weird situation? Now a girl had technically cooked him some food and was awaiting his feedback. Was his life really turning into a rom-com? just like Setsuna had prophesied. Then the spider bot clicked its mandibles at him impatiently, and he remembered how the universe loved to screw with him. With a sigh, he took a scoop and the memories flooded back to him like a bursting dam. He was a kid who had just come home from school, tugging at his mother's apron insistently until she lowered her ladle for him. Her smile was as bright as the sun, short light hair framing a beautiful face. He was tiny again, helping May to chop up the beetroots with one of Aftermath's arms. It was hard to get the beetroot stains out of the prosthetics gaps, so naturally he did it for her. Before he knew it, he was Izuku once more, overwhelmed with emotion as memories of home left him with wet cheeks. Warm tears rolled down his face. May stared for a moment before wincing. "That bad, huh? Sorry, dude. I didn't mean to," she apologized, reaching for a tissue. "No, it's great," Izuku said suddenly, taking another spoonful. "You're great." He didn't even care that he'd said that last part. May stared at him enjoying the food before deciding to take a bite herself, a stunned expression appearing once she did. "Hey, it's actually really good. In fact, it's just like how my mom used to make it, with a little too much flavor. Not bad at all." Izuku blinked, though he continued eating. "Wait, you used me as a guinea pig?" "Think of it as a pre-order edition. You're my first client, after all," May said shamelessly, pulling out a notepad. "Now, what's your feedback?" "Well, the boy muttered, having mostly gotten a hold of his emotions now. "I think the design could be improved. I don't think the way it moves about and looks is very kid-friendly. Then there's the whole issue of the food coming out of its butt. I was going to say abdomen, but I suppose butt works too." "Alright Tilda. Okay, so we have the design, and the presentation method. I wonder if," May said to herself, trailing off. Izuku watched while she scribbled down everything she thought in her little notepad, mumbling to herself quietly all the while. It reminded him of himself, actually. Perhaps she was his counterpart in the support department? How curious. The boy continued eating, enjoying the strong flavor of the soup. Might as well enjoy it since he was here. He even managed to talk with May about some of the equipment that local heroes were using, exchanging opinions and ideas. All in all, he actually noticed that they had a lot of things in common, from ideas for improving the gadgets that local heroes carried, to different applications of quirks that could be boosted with technology. If only he had his notebook with him now. Time passed faster than he'd anticipated, and his plate was nearly empty by the end of their long conversation. The lovely fact that he was having lunch and chatting with a cute girl was a little ruined by the spider bot constantly staring at him throughout the entire meal. He finally realized it had been waiting for him to finish when it promptly scooped up the plates after they were done and loaded them into itself. The construct hopped off the table and skittered into the dark corners of the workshop, Izuku suppressing a shudder at the speed of which it moved. Yeah, definitely not kid-friendly. Either way, he thanked May for the meal while she just patted his shoulder with a big laugh, saying that she was the one who couldn't thank him enough for his help. "Say, what's your quirk?" she asked suddenly. "Me? It's called Superpower. It's an augmentation-type quirk that boosts my base strength to incredible levels, but it's uncontrollable for now. Breaks my bones if I'm not careful," he listed, rattling off the scripted excuse All Might had prepared for him. "Oh Tilda. Well then, come visit sometime. I'll be sure to make something nice for ya," May said happily, that big, radiant smile plastered on her face. "Also, isn't the sports festival coming up soon? Feel free to borrow any of my babies if you need them. How about a phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range?" I think hero department students don't get to bring gadgets onto the field." "Is that so? Shame. Ah well, come back soon, ya hear? I can't wait for more feedback from you so we can make more babies together," she said earnestly, gazing into his eyes all the while. "In fact, I had a lot of fun sharing what my babies could do with you. I can sense this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, my dude." "So did I." "Which, the friendship part or the baby-making part?" May asked coyly. "Both." Izuku returned her smile with one of his own, finding that he actually really enjoyed talking to her. "Be seeing you, Hatsume-san. Again, thanks for the meal." "No problem. See you in the sports festival." She waved while her two little spherical robots appeared beside her, flapping their ears to wave goodbye as well. He waved back as he left the support department. Bye-bye. Izuku soon got back to class with a full stomach. Somehow, he couldn't get the feeling of childhood nostalgia out of his head after that meal, the lingering emotions he felt and those memories warming his heart. His memory or not, it didn't matter. It'd be good to have maybe his friends too. No dumb spider bot was going to ruin that. The boy paused for a moment at the realization. Did he just make a new friend? There was a big, silly smile on his face for all to see. Classes went on as usual, the familiar chime of the school bell finally signaling that it was time to go home. Izuku hummed to himself and packed up his things, looking up to find Ida and Ochako already coming over. Hey, Deku-kun. Ochako waved, her cheeks pinker than usual. "Wanna walk home together?" "Sure, Uraka-san." He smiled, before noticing her flushed face. "Did something happen? You're looking a little red." "It's nothing," she squeaked, averting her eyes. Her ears were positively glowing, though. Izuku felt some concern wash over him, mixed with some nervousness. Ochako was someone he considered to be his first real friend in years, but at times like this he was reminded of how she was also a really cute girl. Seeing her blush like that made his heart beat faster, but it also made him feel some concern as any friend would do. "That's a question we should be asking you, Midoriya-kun." Ida's back straightened stiffly even when he praised Izuku. "You kept wearing that big smile on your face ever since you came back from lunch. Good news, perhaps?" "It's, a little embarrassing." Ochako blinked, peering at him with those large, innocent eyes. "Well, I think I made a new friend," Izuku said shyly, rubbing the back of his head. "So I'm a little happy." "Really? That's great," Ida said. "Yeah, Deku-kun," Ochako agreed, suddenly regaining her bubbly demeanor. "Alright. Well, I suppose that's the third friend I made and I didn't really have any before. You were my first friend here, Uraka-san, while Ida-kun was my second. I think the two of you showed me that I was still someone worthwhile." Izuku gave them a small smile. "I'm really blessed to have met you guys." Izuku's radiant smile was like a brilliant morning sunrise, and he soon found Ida and Ochako squinting at him with equally happy grins. Guys? Are you alright?" the boy asked timidly. "If your smile gets any brighter I'm going to get sunburn, Deku-kun. I'm starting to see stars." Sorry." The trio shared a quick bout of laughter at that, before making their way over the enormous classroom door. Sliding it open, however, revealed a rather unexpected situation. A crowd of students from the other classes had seemingly gathered around the 1A classroom, murmuring and chattering amongst themselves in hushed tones. Then they noticed Class 1A and started scoping them out, eyeing them cautiously. Izuku stepped in front of Ochako protectively, shielding her from the mob. They're crowding the exit." Minatus walked from beside Ida. "They're scoping out the competition, dipshit." Bakugo growled and simply strode past them, ignoring the dwarf's indignant look. "We're the ones that survived the attack on USJ." The blonde took one look at the surrounding mob, annoyance seeping through his posture. "It's pointless to try, so get the fuck out of my way. You goddamn extras." "Bakugo-kun, you can't just call people extras just because you don't know them," Ida protested, his hand waving about mechanically. Izuku held back a sigh while Ochako continued to look nervous. Now everyone was going to think Class 1A was. "Well, I came to see what you guys were made of, but..." A tall purple-haired boy with dead eyes parted the crowd, staring down at Bakugo. "I didn't think you'd be this arrogant. Are all the students in the hero department like you?" And there it was. Izuku tried to ignore the growl escaping Bakugo while he sized up the other boy. "Seeing something like this makes me disillusioned. Did you know that there's a lot of people who ended up in the general education department because they failed the hero entrance exam?" The tall boy continued, unperturbed. "Based on the results of the sports festival, there's also the possibility of coming under review to be transferred to the hero department. The opposite is true as well." Izuku paused at the words. "So if one didn't do well enough, They could be kicked out of the hero department to make space for newer, stronger talent? It was a cutthroat world out there. Scoping out the competition? If anything, a general-ed student like me is thinking of how nice it would be to pull those hero department students off their high horses. Tired purple eyes met enraged crimson ones. Consider this my declaration of war. Ochako, Izuku, and Ida had the same thought running through their minds simultaneously. This person's bold too. You Class A students are full of hubris, aren't you? A blond boy pushed past the crowd to appear before them. Our class will be looking forward to tearing down your ivory towers on which you sit so high and mighty. Then we'll see who the real hero students are. The blonde paused upon seeing Izuku, his smug expression vanishing instantly and replaced with a smoldering glare. You, he hissed. Izuku looked left, right, and finally behind him where Ochako looked just as puzzled before pointing to himself. Me? Yes, you. You're Midoriya Izuku. I've heard of you. Gray eyes met his, the boy's voice angry and challenging. I know what you did, what you're trying to do. Did you really think you could get away with it? I don't. Izuku tried, only to be cut off with another glare. I'm Monominato from 1B. Oh boy. And I can't wait to kick your ass, Midoriya Izuku. Monoma growled, spitting his name as if it were a vulgarity. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Monoma-san, quit it with a nice guy act, okay? You're not gonna fool me. The blonde strode up to him quickly, fists clenched. People like you who have such asinine reasons for becoming a hero disgust me. Ochako let out a small eek of surprise while still behind Izuku, and the green-haired boy felt a sudden surge of anger. This Monoma guy might have been misunderstanding him, but was there really a need to be so aggressive? Monoma-san, I can explain. No, I don't want to hear anything from you. You're everything that's wrong with the heroics industry, and I'll be looking forward to beating some goddamn sense into you. Monoma refused to back down, getting right up in Izuku's face and baring his teeth. Maybe then you'll rethink why you wanted to be a hero in the first place. Izuku's head throbbed, dark green fury bubbling under his skin. Watch your mouth, blondie. Izuku snarled, eyes blazing. You'll be eating those fucking words when I make you scream like a pussy. There was short, stunned silence before a wave of ooze rippled through the gathered crowd, Izuku quickly regaining his senses while Monoma stared at him angrily. Some of them took a nervous step back. What was, that wasn't? Memories of middle school flashed in his mind, the burning fury he just felt back with a vengeance. What can you even do? Sorry, Izuku whispered and pushed past the crowd, Ochako and Ida exchanging stunned glances before following behind him worriedly. Their walk to the front gate was silent, though he could practically feel his friend's gazes beaming concern onto his back. That anger, that rage. It hadn't been him. Or had it? He didn't know anymore. Deku-kun. Ochako began timidly. Is everything okay? Izuku finally mustered up the courage to look at his friends, finding them glancing over at him with worried expressions. His heart ached. He was so fortunate to have people that cared about him. I'm fine, Uraka-san, Ida-kun. He tried to find the words. Have a lot on my mind. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. I didn't know what came over me. Izuku tried, shoulders slumping. I just got so mad and said something I shouldn't have. You got angry, and that's alright, Ida said suddenly, nodding. Everybody gets angry sometimes. You don't have to keep bottling up your emotions, you know. Right, Deku-kun. I mean, even I get angry sometimes, Ochako agreed. Plus, that guy was being real mean. What was he even talking about? A harmless misunderstanding, that's all. Izuku sighed, wincing when he remembered the look on Monoma's face. I'll apologize to him when we meet again in the sports festival. Deku-kun. Are you really alright? His brunette friend asked worriedly. It took him a moment to look up at her. I don't know. He answered honestly, voice quiet. Well, then. Izuku was surprised by the sudden warmth enveloping his hand. Ochako squeezed his palm reassuringly, looking right into his eyes. He felt his cheeks and ears warm up. If there's anything that you're having trouble with, you can talk to us, Ochako said confidently, nodding. We're We're your friends too. That's right, Midoriya-kun. Ida grasped his other hand, looking emotional for the first time ever. Don't worry, we'll be here to help. Izuku couldn't help it, emotions welling forth from deep within his heart. They were his friends. Real, true friends that actually cared for him. Something he lacked for the past 10 years. A tear rolled down his cheek as he lowered his head with a bow, grateful to the both of them. Thank you. Both of you, Izuku whispered, barely enough for them to hear. Ida and Ochako didn't need to exchange looks when they wrapped him into a tight hug, the former giving him a few encouraging pats on the back while the latter kept squeezing his hand for dear life. They knew he needed it. It was a few seconds later when they parted, Izuku's entire body red from embarrassment. That was pretty lame, wasn't it? A mistake on my part, I guess, Izuku said sheepishly. That's not true. I think it's really difficult to open up like that. Ochako shook her head, before giving him another one of her bright, hope-filled smiles. Feeling emotions is nothing to be ashamed of, even when you're a guy. We're only human, after all. We're young, Midoriya-kun. There's a long road ahead of us. Ida smiled. So feel free to make all the mistakes you want, especially when you can learn from them. A small silence plagued the air before the corners of Izuku's mouth curved upward, evolving into a series of light giggles which he shared with Ochako. Did I say something wrong? Ida asked, puzzled. It's nothing. I just didn't think our straightforward, rule-abiding class president would be an advocate of mistake-making. Izuku smiled. Yeah, Ida-kun. So you do have a side that isn't as serious, huh? Ochako cheered, relieved that the situation was somewhat back to normal. Of course, I am not saying you should make mistakes, but rather, treat them as a learning experience to grow. And Ida began defending himself, rambling to them in one of his infamous speeches once more. The trio of friends walked together, chatting amongst themselves like all teenagers did. Izuku continued walking with them, refusing to let the past drag him down. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the annual UA Sports Festival. Everybody say hey. President Mike howled over the speakers, his trademark voice echoing throughout the stadium. Sound erupted in the stands when the crowd responded with thunderous cheers. Celebratory fireworks filled the sky with colored smoke and noise. My name is President Mike, and I'll be your host on this lovely morning. Joining me is none other than UA's famous Bagworm-san, Asuriad. Yo. There was a minute of small talk where President Mike listed out the safety procedures, along with the emergency exits and entrances of the stadium. Finally, it was time for the main event. You know their names, you know their stories, but do you know their style? Let's give it up for the first batch of this year's Hero Department, Class 1A. The audience roared with excitement, the sound of cheering and whistles meeting Izuku's ears. This was it, huh? He thought back to only yesterday, where he gently told Kiri and Mimi to stay at home for the festival. He felt that it wouldn't be fair to have both of them help him, especially with their overwhelming power. And it would cause a panic if both vigilante sisters suddenly appeared in the stadium. Kiri had been a little disappointed at first, but then cheered up at the prospect of spending more time with Inko. Mimi had been more focused on solving the memory leak issue that he'd been experiencing. In fact, he was pretty certain she felt guilty, that she thought it was her fault the others' memories were seeping into his mind. He quickly reassured her that it wasn't her fault, it was something that nobody could have anticipated. Either way, he made sure that both sisters were happy before he left for the stadium that morning, remembering how they'd waved to him excitedly and cheered for him. Good luck, Onyai-chan. You can do it. Kiri waved rapidly, her other hand gripping the hem of Inko's apron. Good luck, Aniki. Kick some ass for me. Mimi grinned, pumping her tiny fist into the air. All the best, Izuku. His mother smiled at him, tears beating at the corner of her eyes. You've come so far, my baby boy. Izuku had engulfed all three of them in a warm, loving hug before setting off, promising that he would do his best. Now he was back in the present, the roar of the crowd meeting his ears while President Mike started to introduce the rest of the classes. For a moment he thought of Todoroki's strange declaration of challenge before shrugging it off, remembering what he was here for. I want you to tell the world I am here, All Might. Kiri. Mimi. Mom. Izuku took a deep breath, emerald eyes snapping open and gleaming with determination. Just watch me. Sports Festival Start. Chapter 10 End Notes. Thank you for reading. Chapter 11 Trials. Midoriya Kirimi had her eyes glued to the screen, watching as her brother thundered across the frozen ground like a man possessed. He was in the lead behind the ice quirk user, his emerald form racing across a frozen heap of gargantuan metal. Her sister Izumi had a contemplative look on her face, little fists gripping her skirt tight while she muttered under her breath and analyzed the situation. She too had almost all of her attention on the TV, wishing for her brother's success. Inko, however, Inko wailed from the couch, hugging the two sisters tightly while still focusing on the TV. My boy. My baby. The siblings quickly dabbed at the older woman's wet cheeks, but Inko's tears were like a geyser that gushed all over the room. It's okay. Don't cry, Obachan, Carrie murmured, reaching for another tissue. We're gonna need more tissues, Mimi said. Aftermath appeared behind her and casually strode over to the kitchen to retrieve another box, Inko not even noticing in her worry. Up next was an obstacle that the announcer called the fall, consisting of gaping chasms and tight ropes. Inko let out a horrified squeal as she watched her son begin to make his way across a rope, a heavy metal plate slung atop his back. Mimi's attention was drawn away towards another participant, Kiri easily noticing the way she stiffened. May, a pink-haired student, was laughing maniacally and gliding across the obstacle, avoiding the pitfall entirely. Purple-pink particles erupted from a bulky conical device on her back, and the girl was somehow able to fly without any means of conventional propulsion. The H-drive? That's weird. Mimi muttered under her breath, just like her brother. She's not supposed to have invented it yet. Another gasp from Inko drew Mimi's attention. The next segment of the race was a minefield, and somebody had just stepped on one. The poor woman's wailing reached a crescendo when Izuku promptly blew himself up on the minefield obstacle, using the explosion's recoil to propel himself forward after he lost the lead in the previous obstacle. Kiryu and Mimi watched with interest while Inko let out another pitiful cry. Her worry immediately tripled when Izuku slammed a piece of debris he'd been carrying into the dirt while still midair, detonating the mines that lay between Bakugo and Todoroki. His gambit worked. The two were flung aside while he hurtled forward, tucking and rolling into an immediate run once he landed. Kiri could feel Inko's arms grow weak as the older woman was on the edge of fainting again. The triumphant roar that echoed over the speakers quickly dragged her back to reality. And the winner of the obstacle race is Midoriya Izuku. Of course. Mimi smirked. Was there ever any doubt? Yay, only I-chan. Kiri cheered. Izuku. We'll be right back after a 5-minute break. Present Mike announced over the speakers, the audience starting to mill about in search of restrooms and snack stands. Deku-kun tilde. A young, excited voice called out. Uraka Ochaka trotted up to him, still a little out of breath from the race. She huffed, giving him one of her 1000-watt smiles like always. Behind her Ida wore a sullen expression, having been a speedster beaten at his own game. You were amazing, Deku-kun. She leaned in dangerously close, too innocent to have any ulterior motives. Congrats on first place. It sure stings a bit though. Great job, Midoriya-kun. But to think I'd place so low with a quirk such as my own. Ida grumbled, before straightening with resolve. All the more reason for me to work even harder. Thanks, you too. Izuku blushed at the praise. The trio continued to make some small talk while the rest of the participants enjoyed the short break. Izuku took the time to think about how most of it had been pure luck, but at least he'd managed to put some of the lessons he'd been taught to good use. Be resourceful. Use the environment to your advantage. He had wanted to use his secret trump card, but it was still difficult to activate what he called full cowl, a technique that utilized a mere fraction of one for all instead of the whole thing. After the others had taught him the technique, Mimi had helped him refine it slightly, giving some pointers that allowed him to raise it from 1 to 3%. Even so, maintaining full cowl was still a major problem he was facing. He needed more training seeing as the ability could only be used in bursts for now. It was better than breaking his bones with every use, but he still needed to focus and concentrate to use it. Embrace it. Mimi had told him. Stop thinking of it as a thing to be used, it's a part of you now. She promised to train him more after the festival as there wasn't enough time since everyone else except the two sisters had trained him so far. Unlike the others, they would have plenty of time afterwards. She didn't want him to keep breaking his bones just to wield one for all. He knew it hurt her, hurt all of them to see him do that, which was why he decided he would only do it as a last resort. The look on his mother's face when he told her of his monstrous power still haunted him sometimes. The boy was dragged out of his thoughts when someone behind him cleared their throat. Excuse me? Samimi-san. Moment to talk. They turned to see a blonde girl with long, tan horns. It was one of the girls that had cornered him the other day. Her name was... Izuku searched his mind for a moment. Tsunotori Pony. He remembered her as one of the nice ones, especially when she got a burger for him. Hi, can we help you? Ochako asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. Not you. Pony shook her head. Broccoli boy. We talk. Izuku saw his usually bubbly friend stiffen. Wanting to avoid another repeat of the cafeteria incident, he quickly got between the two girls and held his hands out placatingly. Sure. Tsunotori-san, right? Izuku asked nervously. Do you need something? Short word, please. Pony nodded with a polite smile. Sure. He glanced at Ida and Ochako. You guys go on without me. If you say so, Deku-kun. His brunette friend said hesitantly. Call us if anything happens. Alright, I will. He smiled. Why would anything happen? A few moments later they were off to one side of the field where they could have some semblance of privacy. The members of Class 1B eyed him curiously while they passed, and he was surprised they weren't outright glaring at him. Izuku wondered what this girl wanted with him. Perhaps it was a follow-up from the last time? You wanted to speak to me, Tsunotori-san. Heard what happened with Monoma-kun. Felt bad for you. The horned girl said. Came to say sorry. Izuku blinked in surprise when she made a slight bow. It's fine really. You don't have to. Not under Reiko-chan's instructions. Pony struggled to find the words. Doesn't apologize. Yeah, she told me. The blonde nodded. Monoma usually not so aggressive. Hear rumor. Reiko-chan contain rumor. Stop from spreading. Slip though. Izuku's eyes widened. She had really done that? As far as he was concerned, that girl was now his benefactor. He owed her at least that much for helping to keep his reputation intact. The boy let out a low sigh of relief at the realization. I see. Yes. Reiko-chan help you lots. Pony gave him a relaxed smile. I'm surprised she even did all that for you, to be honest. All that trouble for someone she doesn't even know. Well, if you see her, tell her I said thanks. Izuku sighed, rubbing the back of his head. I definitely owed her a favor for this. The boy didn't notice when Pony's eyes widened comically, striding up to him and suddenly grabbing him by the shoulders. Before he even had any time to process, she was shaking him frantically, a great big grin on her face. Dude. You can speak English? She asked excitedly. I can? Izuku asked in pure confusion, before clamping a hand over his mouth in horror. Oh god, I can speak English. Yes, Pony said. Her fists pumped into the air excitedly. You gotta help me, bro. Japanese is hard as hell and I can't make any bloody sense of this hiragana and katakana stuff. Izuku panicked, backing away while Pony edged closer to him with every word. Juzo's the only other person I know who speaks my language. I mean, the guy's nice and all, but I really miss talking out loud in my native tongue with all my friends. And he can't eat ramen, which is one of my favorites. Poor guy, can you believe it? Pony continued, overwhelmed with eagerness. You know what, the three of us should totally, hang out sometime. I know this burger joint down at Nakamura Street. We're all foreigners this friendly. Izuku thought, stunned by her fearlessness. Thankfully, he was saved when someone called out the blonde's name. Tsunotori-san. They're starting. Yanagi Reiko called, stopping for a moment when she saw Izuku, Pony still edging closer to him with every word. In a bit of a pinch, Midoriya-kun. Hi, Reiko-san. Izuku greeted her nervously. He thought for a moment and decided to add on. This isn't what it looks like. What does it look like? Reiko asked, a hint of mischief in her tired gaze. You tell me. Eventually the platinum blonde managed to pry away her excited friend, shooing her back to the stage where students were gathering. She turned back with a look of amusement, the boy trying not to turn pink in response. Then she gave him another one of those beautiful, demure smiles, winking at him before rejoining her class. Izuku was rooted to the spot. Reiko winked at him. Or was it a blink? He could only see one of her eyes, after all. Nevertheless, he soon made his way back to the crowd gathering around Midnight's stage, heart beating a little faster at the display. What followed next was a quick demonstration of the stadium's energy shields, Cementos demonstrating by launching a fist-sized glob of concrete at the audience which bounced off an invisible barrier. It was reassuring to know that the audience would be safe from any stray attacks from the students' quirks, but it also meant that the next event would be a rowdy one. A rowdy one it was. Midnight flicked her whip towards the Jumbotron, the giant screen showing a spinning graphic reminiscent of a slot machine that finally landed on one particular event. The cavalry battle. Participants would gather in teams with 4 people at maximum, their combined point values from the previous race displayed as a headband upon the rider's head. Their objective was to score the greatest amount of points by stealing headbands from others, and the point value of the number 1 from the race was. Izuku had to say the words to himself again just to comprehend them. 10 million points. That was 7 zeros. The schoolboy felt the world start to tighten around him as Midnight announced that ridiculous figure. A cavalry battle, that was the next event. Headbands with point values, and taking them from opposing teams to increase your own point value. With the 10 million bounty on his head, every other team was going to be after him like sharks drawn to blood. Who would even want to be on his team now? If they even wanted to be with him in the first place. That is. His vision blurred and he was back in that infernal classroom again, surrounded by mocking laughter and condescending looks. At the forefront of his middle school classmates was Bakugo, a hateful sneer on the bully's face as he flaunted his explosion. What can you even do? Izuku grit his teeth and shook his head quickly, ridding himself of those haunting thoughts. It was different now. He was no longer in middle school. No longer the doormat that let everyone walk over him. But those words and feelings from back then weren't something that one could get rid of so easily. The insecurity and feelings of inferiority like scars upon his heart that would never truly fade. He already knew that others would be reluctant to team up with him, especially when he'd gone through the first event without even using his quirk. His classmates only knew him as the boy who would break his own bones every time he used his power, and teaming up with anyone from 1B seemed out of the question. He had to hurry. People were already starting to form teams. The 2 that he wanted on his team were undoubtedly her and him. Deku-kun. A cheerful voice echoed behind him. Izuku whirled around, already expecting an apology or a rejection of some sort. Uraka-san, let's team up, Ochako said happily. He blinked, vision blurring with tears. She was okay with it? Even if teaming up with him would place her in the most disadvantageous position in this event? Uraka-san, Izuku stammered. Are you sure? I mean, everyone will be after these 10 million points. If we play our cards right, we'll definitely win. I feel like you're overestimating me, he said dejectedly. Why would she even want to team up with a wimp like him? As if. She pumped her fists energetically. But when all's said and done, I'd rather team up with people I'm friends with, anytime. Her brilliant smile was as radiant as morning sunrise, and Izuku scrunched his face up in response. An overpowering solar flare before the dreg that he was. Uwa, what's with that face? You'll look ugly like that, you know, Ochako laughed. It's nothing. It's just that you're so bright I can't look at you directly. Moments later they made their decision and headed over to Ida, explaining their plan for a speedy, untouchable horse that could evade all their attackers. However, a surprise came in the form of a rejection from the tall boy. You're amazing as ever, Midoriya-kun. But I apologize. I refuse to join your team, Ida said curtly. Ochako blinked, looking between her 2 friends. Why not? Ever since the entrance exam, I've done nothing but lose to you. The tall boy's gaze was laser-focused on Izuku even when he adjusted his glasses. You're a great friend, but if I keep on following you, chasing your back and relying on you, I will never grow. Ida turned on his heel and marched towards another team. Todoroki's team, which is why I'll be doing my best to challenge you, Midoriya-kun. Izuku gulped, but nodded. I understand, Ida-kun. I won't let you down. His bespectacled friend stopped in his tracks, looking back with the barest hint of a smile and a solemn nod. I know you won't. He could feel Ochako looking between them worriedly, a little "wa" escaping from her lips. To her, it must have been like seeing a friendship break apart, but he knew better. This was a battle between men, at least, that's what he would have thought if he was some sort of shonen protagonist. Right now he was trying not to show the internal panic he felt by wearing a smile, just like Nana had taught him. In the face of adversity, one had to smile. Either way, he had to find new team members, and fast. All the promising students had already banded together, some of them even eyeing him hungrily. Those 10 million points were the ultimate reward in this event. Izuku would make them work for it. He looked around, and found what he was looking for. It was a stretch and he doubted the other student would even accept his proposal, but it was better than standing around and doing nothing. No fence-sitting, that was another lesson he'd learned the hard way. Excuse me. Tokoyami Fumikage opened his eyes, hands still in his pockets. Midoriya Izuku. To what do I owe this pleasure? The bird-headed boy hummed, his eyes calculating. I was wondering if you'd like to be part of my team, Tokoyami-san. Izuku began. What's in it for me, Emerald One? Izuku blinked, formulating an answer on the spot. All eyes will be on us? You get to show off your prowess to the crowd. Do I look like the sort that craves attention? The Chunibayu raised an eyebrow. If it were up to me, I'd rather revel in the dark than stand before this audience of millions. To be honest, having that many people watching does make me nervous. Izuku admitted sheepishly. But recognition is something a hero needs as well. After all, I want to show them that I am here. I see. That recognition you seek is not for your own ego, but rather the means to a noble end goal you gave in mind. Admirable, at the very least. In all fairness, recognition was already the end goal of the sports festival as a whole. An inviting prospect, like whispers in the dark promising of power. Tokoyami's eyes narrowed. However, I will only join you on one condition. NN. Izuku raised an eyebrow. And that would be? Tokoyami leaned in to whisper in Izuku's ear, his voice like a sword being drawn. I want you to tell me about your guardians. Izuku leaned back in confusion. My guardians? You mean my mom? Tokoyami said nothing, wisps of darkness escaping his abdomen. Dark shadow writhed and undulated like an eel when he manifested, letting out a low croon of delight upon seeing Izuku. Ah, my prince of grouse. You have brought the little lord. No, not yet a lord. Dark shadow whispered. A prince, like yourself. There's no need to hide, we mean you no harm. I know what you are, Tokoyami said slowly, carefully. You're like me. I've been looking for someone like you. Yes, yes. Dark shadow shuddered with glee, Ochako looking in curiosity. But little ones are not here. Where? Little ones? Izuku asked. Twin queens. The projection said. Little fairies. Everything stopped, the blood in Izuku's veins turning to ice. The words hit him like an 18-wheeler barreling down the highway and scattered his thoughts all over the floor, rooting him on the spot. Izuku turned deathly pale while the breath caught in his throat. Dark Shadow was talking about his sisters. He knows about them. He could see them? When? Where? Amidst the panic his mind reached a startling realization. They had the same type of quirk. He should have suspected something like this. He had made notes on Tokoyami after all, even comparing the boy's unique quirk to his own. Mimi had managed to affect Kiri invulnerability since they shared the same psychic wavelength. It wasn't too far of a stretch to assume that other projection-type quirks also ran on similar wavelengths. Almost like how certain spectrums of light can only be seen by humans or animals. There was no way he could hide it from Tokoyami, or more specifically, Dark Shadow. I see, Izuku said shakily, trying to hide his panic and failing miserably. You are like me. But not here. Not now. The bird-headed boy's glance flickered to Ochako, who had a look of mild confusion on her face. Izuku grit his teeth in an effort to stop trembling. Please. Tokoyami's expression softened, and he winced. I understand. It was difficult for me, too. Shall we talk after the festival? He held out his hand and Izuku looked as if he had been presented with a live snake. The green-haired boy considered his options. On one hand, it would be unwise to let anyone know of his sister's roles and Valkyrie and Viking, but on the other, he would finally have a chance to understand his quirk better. Even Carrie had admitted she didn't know how she came to be. Izuku sighed. He guessed it would be okay as long as he didn't reveal the secret that they were both actually infamous vigilantes. Tokoyami didn't look untrustworthy, but still. The potential benefits outweighed the risks, as long as he kept a tight lid on the vigilante business. It would be nice to have someone to talk to besides his mom as well. Furthermore, Tokoyami did mention that he'd been looking for someone like him. And Dark Shadow's talk of princes and lords lit a fire under his inquisitive spirit. He gulped, but ultimately shook the other boy's hand. Deal. Dark Shadow cackled and swirled around Tokoyami like a great, ethereal serpent. The crow boy simply patted his head protectively, calming the projection like how one would comfort a younger sibling. It was then Izuku understood, their relationship was just like the one between him and Kiri. They were a family. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm glad you two have solved your differences, Ochako said. Perhaps we are not so different. Izuku glanced at Tokoyami, letting most of the tension drain from his shoulders. Indeed. The crow boy nodded. Dark Shadow slithered through the air, his beak inches away from Izuku's nose. Use your rightful strength, little prince. Like me and mine. The projection gestured to his master. He is mine. And I am his. One can only rely on their own strength. Only then can you ascend to a lord. Okay? Izuku blinked, not really understanding those cryptic words. Midoriya-kun, my dude. Are you done being all mysterious and making deals with shadow demons? He'd recognized that voice anywhere, despite meeting its owner just the other day. She had a very unique disposition, after all. Hatsume May was the type of person that tended to leave a lasting impression. Let's team up, Mr. First Place. May boomed, striding over like she owned the entire stadium. Hello, Hatsume-san. Oh. Do you know her, Deku-kun? Yeah, she's the new friend I made the other day. You know, the one I told you and Ida-kun about, Izuku said bashfully, a tiny smile blooming on his face. Ochako twitched slightly, but the pink-haired girl surged forward without a care, her smile wide as ever. Greetings. I'm Hatsume May, future CEO and chief engineer of Hatsume Heavy Engineering. The pink-haired girl announced, hands on her hips. Nice to meet you. Hatsume Heavy Engineering. Oh. Ochako's eyes lit up in recognition. You're talking about the company that provides the Harrow units. My daddy uses them in his construction work. Ah. Glad to see them being useful. You'd like to join our team? Sure, Hatsume-san, but everyone will be after the 10 million points, and that's precisely why I'm joining. May interrupted, getting right up in Izuku's face while he blushed. If I'm part of your team, my beautiful, adorable, pretty little babies will get a chance to shine in the spotlight on national television. I need sponsors. I need funding. I need it. You babies? Ochako ventured. Right, speaking of babies, May paused to pull out her phone. Look at the baby we made, Midoriya-kun. Isn't he just the cutest thing? It was another picture of that horrid spider bot that lurked around the dark corners of May's workshop. Izuku winced, preparing for the cold shiver that would run down his spine, and nothing happened. May had done a complete overhaul of the spider bot. Now it resembled a large jumping spider instead of the spindly long-legged monstrosity from before. Two large eyes and stubby legs painting a much more child-friendly image. Oh. He's actually kind of cute, Izuku agreed. The bee baby we made? Ochako repeated, starting to turn an odd shade of white. She began trying to peek over Izuku's shoulder until May pulled away. Not yet, He's a work in progress. May smirked. Don't worry though. The pink-haired girl draped an arm over Izuku, and he felt something soft press against his side. Warmth crept up Izuku's cheeks like a house on fire. Me and my dude, we're gonna make tons of babies after this. May gave Ochako a thumbs up, then turned to the blushing boy with a wide grin. Isn't that right, Midoriya-kun? Let's get into some hardcore baby making after we win this thing. What remained of Izuku's composure died an ugly, agonizing death on the ground. Or perhaps somewhere between May's generous bosom and his left arm, especially with how closely she was pressing herself into him. Hardcore baby making? Ochako stammered, looking like she was either going to faint or burst into flames with how red she was turning. The folly of youth. Tokoyami turned away respectfully, a hint of red on his feathers. Be sure to use protection. You too. Protection's nice and all, but you sometimes gotta have that feel, you know? May drawled, wriggling her fingers to demonstrate. I gotta feel the raw material. Gotta know what I'm working with here, and sometimes gloves aren't gonna cut it. I need to feel it, touch it, handle it with my bare hands. Hardcore. Baby making. Ochako said in a trance-like state, her eyes gazing off into the distance. As she's talking about her inventions. Gadgets, machines, devices. Izuku managed with a scarlet face, trying to ignore how soft May's full body felt. She's a tinker, an inventor. Baby. Making babies. The lights were on in Ochako's head, but nobody was home. What, wanna join us in making babies? May smiled, giving the brunette another thumbs up. Sure, why not? I wonder what kind of baby the two of you would make. That seemed to snap Ochako out of her trance, the girl turning tomato red to match her green-haired friend. Her eyes met Izuku's once, before flickering to the ground in pure embarrassment. Me and Deku-kun's baby? Ochako whispered, trembling hands squeezing together atop her belly unconsciously. Izuku lit up like a Christmas tree. Tokoyami looked at Izuku, then Ochako, then back at Izuku again with a sort of understanding. Ah, the folly of youth. Meanwhile, a certain spiky-haired boy was marching across the stadium towards a crowd of gathered students. Yo, Bakugo. He called. Todoroki's already got himself a full team. Team up with me. Shitty hair. Bakugo grunted. It's Kirishima. Remember my name, man. Kirishima huffed. Anyway, let's team up. Who else here can withstand the recoil of your explosions? Someone with enough guts. No, dude. Me. Besides, you've already chosen Mina-chan and Sero-kun, right? With me here, we'll be a horse that can't crumple. Horn buddy. Mina cheered, noticing Kirishima. We'd be glad to have you. Says who? Bakugo snarled. Can your lousy hardening even take a single one of my explosions? I can take 'em all day, bro. I am a rock. Kirishima huffed proudly. I am an island. So a rock feels no pain? Sero asked wryly. And an island never cries? Mina finished, giggling. You said it, horn buddy. Fine. You can join the other extras. Bakugo growled, staring back across the stadium and into the crowd. All we have to do is beat shitty Deku and shitty half and half, and prove that I'm the undisputed champion by taking those 10 million points. Don't you mean prove that we are the undisputed champions? Sero raised an eyebrow. He didn't even get a reply. A bright orange ponytail swung from side to side a few meters away, its owner looking around with a thoughtful expression on her face. Kendo-san, what's so special about this guy anyway? Her blonde companion grumbled. We could have filled that one slot on your team with anyone from Class B. Why pick an outsider? A Gen Ed student at that? Because he's not just some guy, Monoma-kun. I saw what he did in the first segment of the race. We're gonna need that kind of power if we want to accomplish our goal of beating Class A. Kendo answered, still looking around. Also, just because someone is from Gen Ed or support doesn't make them any less of a UA student. Don't be a dick. Wasn't trying to imply that. But I gotta know, what changed? Honestly, I didn't expect you to be so on board with the plan. Let's just say there's someone I want to beat. He's made quite the impression on me in the past few days. Kendo smiled, noticing her prey. Hey, there's the guy we're looking for. Go up to him. Me? Monoma asked incredulously. What am I supposed to say? Anything you want. I've got an idea. The blonde boy simply sighed and shrugged, making his way over to their target. Hey, Monoma called, raising an arm. Hey, buddy. I ain't your buddy, pal. The tall, purple-haired boy grunted. But you're about to be mine, aren't you? Don't get too cocky. The blonde trailed off, his eyes suddenly blank and staring at nothing. Kendo narrowed her eyes. So that's how he does it. The purple boy noticed her looking a bit too late, opening his mouth for a question. What are you looking at? Her enlarged hand wrapped around his head, leaving only his eyes visible and widening with a sudden panic. With her other hand Kendo slapped Monoma on the back, the blonde teen jolting awake from the quirk-induced trance. Wake up, doofus. Watch me in case he gets me. Kendo turned to her struggling prisoner. A question, eh? Let me guess, some sort of mental override? No, mind control. Very nice. And very dangerous. There was a flash of anger in the purple boy's eyes. Calm down, I wasn't trying to imply anything. In fact, I think it's a really cool quirk. Kendo showed off her friendliest smile. So cool in fact, that I came all the way here to recruit you. Purple eyes blinked with confusion. That's right, buddy. I've got a proposition for you. Blink twice if you wanna hear it. Her captive did so and she let him go, still keeping her guard up. He opened his mouth but her enlarged finger was on his lips in an instant. Oh no you don't. Tell me how it works first. Monoma-kun, cover your ears. Her classmate grumbled but cupped his ears obediently. I can control anyone who responds to me verbally. The purple boy said hesitantly, surprised when her smile grew wider instead of wilting in discomfort. I call it brainwash. Nice. And what do you call yourself? Shinso Hitoshi. Well, Shinso-san. Kendo's smile was all teeth. Let's get you talking. While Class 1A was forming their teams, Class 1B was doing the same. A lone, stoic-looking girl stood still within the crowd, slowly thinking to herself. Kodai Yui blinked, having not received a single offer to join anyone's team. Oh well. She'd go find someone then. Kendo, being the popular girl, already had a team of 3 within seconds of Midnight's announcement and had decided her final member was an outsider she saw earlier. Too bad, she had wanted to team up with her. Yui thought for a moment. Then again, it wasn't good to keep relying on someone. Looks like she was doing this herself. She sort of understood why no one had tried to get her on their team. They didn't really know how to talk to her, especially with her stoic demeanor. That, and some of them were still wary of her after what she did during the battle training exercise. Yui strode over to the one person who was arguably even quieter than her in class. He stood out in the crowd, his massive frame towering over their classmates. Unsurprisingly, he hadn't been chosen either. The tiny girl reached up and tugged at his shirt sleeve. Bondo-san, Yui said softly. Bondo Kojiro turned slowly, 7 empty holes for eyes gazing down at her. Any other student would have been nervous, or perhaps even terrified at the massive mutant staring down at them. Yui simply tugged at the taller boy's sleeve again, trying to imply her thoughts through her actions. Be my horse. Bondo was quiet for a few long seconds. Then he nodded. Right, they still needed one more person. Yui made her way over to another classmate, this one in particular being one of the strangest individuals she'd ever met. Well, if it isn't Kodai-san then Bondo-san. The dynamic duo, eh? The silent ones. You know, they say it's always the quiet ones you have to watch out for, and in this case I have to agree with them. Man, the two of you already possess a frightening amount of power, but together? I couldn't think of a more dangerous combination. Nah. Just kidding, I definitely can. But it's the intimidation factor, you know? Bondo-san looks like he gonna beat the shit out of me, and Kodai-san looks like she's gonna step on me. Not that I mind, I'm just not really into that sort of thing, but some people definitely are. In fact, I was just talking to... Bondo's massive hand clamped around the speech bubble that was Fukudashi Manga's head. Okay, shutting up now. Manga squeaked. Bondo grunted. Yui blinked. She had no problem with Manga, really. It was just that the boy's mouth tended to run at a million words per minute. Perhaps it was a side effect of his quirk, but manga could talk for hours without ever seeming to stop. He was her exact opposite, so it was rather ironic that they were teaming up. And then, Yui said, and Bondo let go. Phew. Alright, what can I do for you, Kodai-san? Let me guess, you guys need a third member? Yui nodded. Sure, I'd be glad to join you, Manga said cheerfully. What's the plan? Are we rushing in? Or are we going sneaky-beaky like? Yui leaned over and whispered in his ear, or where she thought his ear was. Manga's face turned into an emoticon. Smile. A plan like that? That's crazy, girl. What did the guy ever do to you? You know what, I don't even wanna know. Oh, maybe you like him or something? That's adorable. It's like watching a grade schooler trying to get her crush's attention by annoying him. An arctic stare shut him up faster than Bondo's hand around his face. Right, none of my business. Manga coughed. But are you sure this plan is viable? You'll be detached from your horse. Not to mention what you want me to do with my quirk. Yui tilted her head towards Midnight. Fine, I'll ask her. The talkative boy shrugged. But in return, tell me all the juicy details after you've had your fun with him. I just love a good story. The stoic girl blinked very slowly at him in an effort to show her annoyance. Oh, don't woe at me. Manga soon strode over to Midnight and sent them a thumbs up after they finished talking. Just in time too, seeing as Kendo let out a high-pitched whistle to draw Class 1B's attention. She made a grasping symbol with her fingers atop her head, and they knew what it meant. Gather. The respective team leaders of each horse gathered around Kendo shortly, Yui among them. Monoma was already beside her friend, speaking to the redhead in hushed tones. Getting all of 1B through the obstacle race was his plan, after all. Now it was Kendo's turn. She had a feeling Midoriya-kun had something to do with this sudden sense of competitiveness that welled up in both Class B presidents. Yui shrugged internally, deciding not to pry after seeing how pissed off Monoma had been the other day, cursing about stupid green-haired playboys or whatever that meant. It wouldn't be good for their secondary commander to lose his cool, after all. Everyone here? Kendo took a quick look around, nodding with satisfaction. Good. Team comps. The team leaders reported to her one by one, not wasting any time. Yui simply thumbed over her shoulder when it was her turn. She could practically feel Bondo's empty stare and Manga's hand waving. Alright. Before we start, does anyone else have anything they want to add? Yui leaned over and whispered the plan into her friend's ear. The others had the pleasure of watching Kendo's face change from mild amusement, then shock, and finally to a devilish smile. That's crazy, but I like crazy. Think you can take him? Yui shrugged. Probably not. She admitted. Well, I like that plan too much to let it go to waste. A few modifications and it should fit in nicely with ours. Kendo gave her a thumbs up. Yo, Setsuna-chan. Yeah? You're heading up there to back up Yui-chan if she gets into trouble, which she most likely will. Broccoli boy, who else? Aight. Setsuna smiled darkly, some of the other team leaders backing away nervously. Tokage-san is heading up where now? Someone asked. You know it when you see it. As for when it appears, Yui-chan will give the signal, Kendo said. On her go, execute Operation Baby Dog. Kodai-san, you're giving the signal? Hiriren asked dubiously from beside her. No offense, but you're not exactly the loudest person in the room. Want me to do it? Believe me, you'll definitely notice. The red-headed girl smirked knowingly, patting Yui on the shoulder. Let's just say she's got something big in mind. Operation Baby Dog? Owaseyo Setsu asked, bewildered. It was either this or Operation Piccolo. Blamed Monoma-kun for the silly names. Me. Moving on. Number off. 1. They did so at her instruction, with absolute faith in her leadership. Remember your team numbers. We'll use Midnight Sensei's stage as a reference point. Odd groups go right, even groups go left. Kendo ordered, demonstrating with her hands. That means teams 1, 3, 5, right, 2, 4, 6, left. Teams 5 and 6 are skirmishers, to finish off anyone too close to the edge or weakened and trying to escape. Team leaders for 5 and 6, raise your hands. Guys, take note. The team leaders nodded as one. Okay, listen up. You are going to go after them, very slowly before the signal. And by slowly I mean super slow. Keep a low profile and let them exhaust themselves first. It'd be ideal if they fought each other too. Do not engage Bakugo-san early into the match. The last thing we need is Bomboy breaking our formations, which I know he's capable of. Keep an eye on that one. If you get aggroed, you are going to lose your headband because you didn't know what to do. The ponytailed girl waited for them to nod again before continuing. Watch out for Todoroki-san as well. If you get caught by the ice, you're also going to lose your headband, for not being where you were supposed to be. Whatever you do, do not stand next to other teams or he'll catch all of you with a no attack. Can't we just avoid Bakugo-san until he cools off? Awase suggested. Aggro reset. There is no aggro reset with that guy. Kendo shook her head. Which is why we'll be using that to our advantage. Monoma-kun's team will be in charge of stalling Team Bakugo and drawing their attention away. Even better if they can steal their headband. Isn't that right, buddy? Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Monoma grumbled but nodded. I'll do my best. I'm sure you will. As long as you don't over-aggro. Keep him mad enough to distract him, but don't rile him up too much or you'll give him enough motivation to beat you in one fell swoop. I know how that type of person thinks. The redhead looked to her audience. Guys, back him up when he needs help. Also, watch the clock and pay attention to the timer. We need to regroup in those last 5 minutes or shoot for the most number of points, whatever comes first. Improvise, overcome and adapt as needed. Roger that. Okay, right. Meanwhile, Yui-chan's going to do her thing. Her team's in charge of facing Team Midoriya. Kendo sent her friend a knowing look. Setsuna-chan's team is gonna be helping her out. Midoriya? Heard on the grapevine that he's got some sort of super strength quirk with higher recoil, Awase stated, glancing at Yui nervously. You gonna be alright, Kodai-san? Yui gave him a quiet nod. Of course she will, I believe in her. Get those 10 million points for Class B. Kendo cheered. Finally, my team will be primarily focusing on Team Todoroki. Team Kaburo, you're partying with me to counter the ice. The leader of Team 2, Kaburo-sen, nodded politely in response. Now, remember what our end goal is. Surpass Class A, that means we have to beat their top 3 contenders, claiming the 10 million points is a bonus. I want at least 1 team from Class B in the final event. They're stronger than us, or at least more experienced, which is why we can't afford to hold back. What we lack in skill we'll have to make up with numbers and tactics. At first I was thinking we should give the captured headbands to the strongest members of our class, but... Kendo looked around and smiled. The way I see it, you've earned your place in the finals if you managed to get those points yourself anyway. Kendo-san, Awase said, looking shocked. Grateful looks were directed at the Class B president. No infighting. If you see any of Class A's teams alone out there and you've got a B team nearby, collapse on them. Collapse on them like a house of falling bricks. Take their headbands and regroup with friendly teams to retreat, smash and grab. If they start to huddle up, penetrate and annihilate. Nuke 'em, dot 'em, whatever, just take the headbands and get out of there ASAP. Kendo smacked a fist into her palm for emphasis. The reason I'm making this so vague is because no plan survives contact with the enemy. There'll certainly be hiccups here and there that you guys will have to respond to in your own ways. We'll be using mission-type tactics for this, meaning that I just have a set goal. It's up to you guys to use whatever methods you see fit to reach that goal. A favorable situation will never be exploited if commanders wait for orders. The highest commander and the youngest soldier must be conscious of the fact that a mission and inactivity are worse than resorting to the wrong expedient. Remember, surpass Class A. The girl held out her hand, and the other team leaders placed their hands together. Go forth and conquer. For Vlad-sensei. For Vlad-sensei. The others cheered. Even Yui whispered the words in her tiny voice. In the stands where the teachers were seated, 1B homeroom teacher Vlad King shed a manly tear. I'm back, everyone. Look what I've got. Hello, hello. 3 heads glanced towards Hatsume May, now back with an armful of gadgets and a little silver robot floating behind her. Ooh, a hero. Ochako inspected it, cooing all the while. What's this cutie's name? Look Look. I did it, Zenith. He'll be my support unit for this mission. Hatsume replied, reaching for a metallic backpack that she handed over to Izuku. Here, Midoriya-kun. Wear this. Is that a jetpack modeled after the Buster Hero, Airjet? Izuku held the device like a priceless treasure. Whoa, so cool. That's not all. It has a secret function as well. It can. May leaned in to whisper in Izuku's ear, the boy blushing scarlet until he began paying attention. The embarrassment he felt was soon replaced by amazement, eyes widening in awe. In the background Ochako pouted, slipping on a pair of hover boots that May had gotten for her. Tokoyami simply shrugged and glanced over at the opposing teams with a watchful eye. Whoa, so it has that sort of function. Was your inspiration the hero toy master? You know it, my dude. May grinned, putting on her harness. All you have to do is press that button. Emergencies only, though. Awesome. Izuku muttered to himself, strapping the jetpack on. Okay, here we go. May adjusted the jetpack, running her hands across Izuku's chest and causing him to blush again. Zenith, buddy, help me do a final checkup. Roger, Roger. Zenith beeped. Not calling him your baby? Izuku tried, seeking any topic to distract himself from May's light but firm touch. Oh, I didn't make Zenith, I just gave him a new hero shell since his old one was worn out. He belonged to my mom, which in turn belonged to her dad, so on and so forth. Passed down from parent to child, you see. May looked up with a grin, and he turned away so as to not bump noses with her. He's been in my family for ages. Can't even remember how old he's supposed to be. I see. Izuku blushed as her fingers played across his arms and barely paying attention to her words. A girl was so close to him. He really hoped she couldn't feel how fast his heart was beating. Elevated heart rate detected. Recommend loosing straps. Zenith chirped. Why did he have to tempt fate? Too tight, huh? The pink-haired schoolgirl frowned, pressing her chest against his and circling her arms around his torso to adjust the jetpack. Here, let me help. Somewhere on Izuku's body was definitely getting too tight, and May wasn't helping one bit. He froze, subconsciously committing this scene to memory. Everything about this girl was memorable, from her amazing smile and pretty golden eyes, to the light smell of grease mixed with natural sweat, the warm softness he felt on his chest. No, bad thoughts. There. May finished, patting him on the shoulder. She presented her back to him. Mind helping me with mine? Izuku began. I'll help you, Hatsume-san, Ochako said quickly, face red as a tomato. Sure, thanks. Izuku couldn't decide if he wanted to sigh with relief or regret. He and Tokoyami watched as Ochako helped May float the heavy rig that was supposed to go on her back, an intimidating device that looked like a mechanical spine. Overlapping metal plates clicked and hissed when the machine attached itself onto her, shifting metal parts extending and overlaying themselves on May's right shoulder before a gap opened in the device. They watched curiously when Zenith floated down, settling himself into the cavity perfectly like an egg within a nest. Docking mode. Zenith beeped. Complete. Initiating secondary docking. Phase 2. May lifted up another angular metal plate, this one for covering her chest. She frowned when it didn't quite seem to fit, grumbling to herself about how they'd grown again. Izuku and Tokoyami politely pretended they didn't hear that last part, and Ochako's expression was emptier than her fridge. After a few adjustments she was done, chest armor gleaming and back rig activated. Two conical fins rotated atop her back like a pair of cherub's wings as the girl tested them, her goggles lenses glowing a futuristic purple-pink for a second. Remote point defense system, check. Artificial neural interface, the prongs on her goggles buzzed, and the small fins on her back clicked into place. Check. All systems go. We are combat ready. Zenith reported cutely. Right on time, too. Midnight announced that the cavalry battle was about to start, and Team Midoriya soon found themselves in their starting positions along with the other teams. Gazes shimmering with what eyed them from nearly every direction, Izuku noted how the members of Class B looked at them differently, steely determination and intent directed not at the 10 million points resting on his head, but the entirety of Class A. Some sort of plan they had agreed on, perhaps? He instructed his team to be extra cautious of anyone from the opposing class, just in case. Midnight started the countdown, the numbers displayed on the jumbotron for all to see. 3. Midnight counted, the crowd echoing the countdown with barely contained excitement. In the Midoriya household, two sisters squeaked as Reiko hugged them lovingly, her eyes glimmering with worried tears. Carrie and Mimi let her do so, gazes still focused on their brother. 2. In the realm of memories and dreams, the members of One for All watched Shimura Nana chugging her beer straight from the bottle. They were having an outdoor barbecue in the courtyard of all things, Izuku's vision displayed on the white screen that Hiro had created. A hamburger patty flipped through the air, the pom-pom on Coco's head flying off as she leapt to grab it. 1. Izuku cracked his knuckles, and Dark Shadow let out a low rumble. He turned to his team, giving them a final word of encouragement before the battle began. "Let's do this." Team Midoriya lifted off the ground. One moment they were there and the next they weren't, Aoyama's naval laser carving a ravine into where they'd once stood. The three Class A teams that were aiming for them cursed and peeled away, not even noticing that one team among them already lost their headband. The B team that stole it backed off, circling around in a wide arc for another flyby. Something fast and sharp whizzed through the air, bouncing off Dark Shadow's arms when he deflected the attack with a single swipe. Jir grunted, readying her earphone jacks for another blow. In the air they had the advantage, only ranged quirks could reach them, and Tokoyami had two angles of vision to watch for incoming attacks. Ochaka utilized her quirk to make everyone weightless, and May's tech allowed him to get out of being cornered by escaping into the air. It was a decent plan, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. Team Midoriya landed, and were beset by enemies from all sides once again. Izuku's mind raced, analyzing the scene before him in the span of a second. 3 teams. Mid-ranged quirks. Bruiser blaster combo. Only Class A? Where were the teams from Class B? A 4th and 5th team circled in from the left and right respectively, but their angle of attack was perpendicular to him. They were aiming for the headbands of Class A. His classmates' headbands vanished, the two oblivious riders not even noticing as they were too focused on the 10 million points. Class B is working together. Izuku realized. This isn't good. Present Mike yelled something that he didn't hear, the boy too focused on dodging and trying not to let the opposing teams box them in. His worries took a backseat when he spotted something massive charging at them through the corner of his eye, the third team that had been waiting to get into an advantageous position. Shoji Mezzo surged at them like a raging bull, torso low to the ground. His heavy feet dug into the dirt with every step. He was alone. No. Izuku glanced at the hump of tangled flesh the other boy had formed on his back. A shelter. For a rider. His instincts took over when he tilted his head, barely avoiding the spear-like tongue that aimed for his forehead. Good reflexes, Midoriya-chan. Very good, Karo. Tsuyu grunted from atop Shoji's back. Mineta-chan. A volley of purple balls exploded from Shoji's back along with an angry cry of jealousy. Point defense. May barked. Firing. Firing. Twin beams of dark purple-pink energy scythed through the air from the fins on May's back, carving through Mineta's throne orbs like a hot knife through butter. The beams didn't destroy the spheres but instead cut them in half, altering their trajectories and scattering them away from Izuku's team instead of atop them. Shoji grunted and skidded to a halt, nearly stepping into the field of sticky filth. Izuku activated May's jetpack and they were sailing through the air once more, leaving behind more obstacles to get in the other team's way. It was a good play, but he knew they couldn't keep escaping through the air the whole match. Someone would figure out a way to counter or exploit their aerial escape route. His mind spun, 1,000 scenarios playing out before him. Keep moving, always keep moving. It wasn't worth it to get into a battle, not when a third party could simply swoop in and swipe the 10 million off his head when he'd be busy fighting. The best option was to keep evading them and work with the clock. Shitty. Izuku knew that voice. There he was, just as expected. Dark Shadow went on the defensive upon Izuku's taps on Tokoyami and May's shoulders. The support student prepared to fire short-range, wide-angle beam attack to shoot their attacker out of the air. Fucking? He had already anticipated this beforehand, knowing that his opponent could move in all 3 dimensions with his explosions. Be proactive, not reactive. Predict your opponent's moves and plan countermeasures. They would be ready for whatever Bakugo threw at them and counterattack. Deku. They didn't have to. Something small and dark-haired slammed into Bakugo mid-air feet first, folding him in two like a clean towel. Izuku's eyes widened in shock as the figure used Bakugo's falling body as a springboard, kicking off the blonde and leaping towards him with an outstretched hand. Yui Kodai hurtled at Team Midoriya like an emotionless missile. Minutes ago, small skirmishes were taking place on the stadium ground. Blows were exchanged, quirk effects thrown left and right in a flashy display of power. It did not impress the stoic girl who was waiting patiently, not one bit. The waiting was the most difficult part. Really. Team Kodai circled around the edges and avoided conflict, helping their fellow classmates whenever they could. Good things come to those who wait, or at least that was how the quote went. Yui didn't like that quote very much. She was a normal, plain, boring girl. That was how she liked it. Because people were always afraid of her before she became that. It was why she ended up like this, an emotionless, non-threatening, fairly normal teenager. Just to fit in with society. But sometimes she just had to let it out. She wasn't sure if it was her quirk, or her own actual desire that caused her to be like this. In the end, she channeled those horrid thoughts and feelings into something positive, something good. A career in heroism. That way, she could express herself all she wanted and not get in trouble for it. Her reminiscing soon ended when Bondo grunted beneath her, the muscular boy nodding towards their target, Team Midoriya. Slippery little things they were, hopping from place to place like a frog. Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hoppity. It was almost time. They just needed an opportunity. Shitty, a blonde boy from Class A roared, his palms igniting and sending him into the air. That would do. She patted Bondo and readied herself while the heavy-set boy pulled an arm back. Manga cleared his throat and nodded at her, awaiting her signal. Fucking? Yui used her quirk. She shrunk down to the size of an action figure in the blink of an eye, curling up into a ball atop Bondo's palm. A muscular arm lands forward and the girl hurtled through the air as if she'd been shot through a cannon. It was a crazy, insane plan that even Bondo had been reluctant to agree on at first, but they made it work. It had to work. Deku. It did. Of course a guy with 7 eyes would make a great pitcher. Yui tilted herself at just the right angle and returned to normal size just before slamming both feet into Bakugo's stomach, the boy's body crumpling around her legs when all her momentum rocketed into him with a heavy crunch. With that momentum his body spun midair, giving Yui a fraction of a second to bring herself up and launch off him like a diver off a springboard. She did so, aiming for the 10 million points on a shocked Izuku's forehead. Tokoya. Dark shadow. Darkness itself raced towards her in the shape of bestial claws, Yui twisting her form and shrinking simultaneously to avoid those shadowy daggers. Slipping through Dark Shadow's fingers she landed on the projection's arm, sprinting along its length to avoid another wild swipe and bouncing within the labyrinth of tangled limbs like a ricocheting bullet. She was actually much stronger and faster in her tiny form compared to her regular one, evidenced by the lightning-quick uppercut that sent Dark Shadow sprawling backward in pain. Firing solution. The pink-haired girl at Izuku's side yelled. Lock on, lock on. Her little support bot, a hero unit mounted on her shoulder, announced with flashing eyes. Yui knew she couldn't dodge the beam attack, not when a computer was doing the targeting. She instead darted right at the bird-headed boy, Tokoyami, finding cover in the chaos and the brief moment she broke their line of sight. Even if the hero had locked onto her, it would have had to shoot through Tokoyami to score a hit. She bounced between their bodies, feet light and aiming for her target. What the, where? She heard Izuku cry out, feeling the others looking around in shock. In the end, it was the brunette girl that spotted her. Deku-kun. On your right shoulder. Izuku whirled, a hand coming up to catch her. Too little, too late. Yui's chambered fist crashed into the boy's cheekbone, snapping his head to the side painfully. Offhandedly, she wondered if they could still be friends after this. She hoped so. Her other hand pulled at fabric, snatching away those precious 10 million points. And what's this? A complete upset. A dark horse from Class B, Team Kodai, has attained the 10 million points. I don't believe what I'm seeing here, is being detached from your horse even allowed. I'll allow it. And since Kodai-san's feet haven't touched the stadium floor, she's still in the game. Midnight announced with a flourish of her whip. Here at UA, we encourage creative thinking and unorthodox tactics. Incredible. You heard it here first, folks. No true hero is a one-trick pony. Plus ultra. Did you just steal my line? What an amazing turn of events. Let's take a look at the scoreboard. Present Mike paused. What? What's happening Class A? Where have most of those points gone? Don't tell me, is this the fabled pride before the fall? Yeah. Go Class 1B. Vlad King suddenly stood from his position in the teacher's stand, his triumphant expression displayed on the jumbotron as the cameras temporarily focused on him. Eat that, Aizawa. Objective complete. Yui kicked off Izuku's shoulder and rocketed downward, slipping past Dark Shadow with the still normal-sized headband wrapped around her neck like a fluttering cape. At this size, she could use her gym uniform's jacket as a parachute to slow her fall so her team could catch her. Oh no you don't. A hand closed around her, fingers shimmering with small arcs of emerald lightning. Yui looked up just in time to see Izuku wipe the 10 million points off her, tossing the headband around his neck as he hesitated with what to do with the miniature girl in his grip. He looked at her as if she was some fragile thing that could be easily broken, like a little doll. His fingers loosened inadvertently, and Yui was glad he did so, otherwise, she'd broken all 5 of them with what she was about to do next. The girl shifted back to normal size, stunning the green-haired boy as his hand snapped open. Tokoyami let out a surprised cry with her sudden way to top his back, and Yui made use of the temporary disorientation she'd caused to wrap her legs around Izuku's torso. Pulling him close she caught him in a tight hold while the boy struggled to throw her off, ignoring his embarrassed shout and wrecking the team's flight pattern. She had to force them to land right now or Dark Shadow would simply peel her off and toss her aside. Yui locked eyes with the brunette on Izuku's team. She saw the other girl's eyes widen at how her hands wrapped themselves around Izuku's neck, restraining him while she prepared to have her fingertips meet. The stoic girl opened her mouth and said a single word. Release. The world shifted. Mass, space, weight and everything in between moved. Yui supersized herself, becoming 3 meters tall. With the sudden increase in weight the jetpack on Izuku's back flared and sputtered, failing to keep them airborne. Ah, Izuku cried, suddenly engulfed in the ultimate softness of Yui's giant bosom. Okay, tiny girl is big now. She's big now, May yelled. Zenith, deploy countermeasures. Dark Shadow. Tokoyami howled. Yui raised a single, gargantuan arm, blocking a barrage of micro-missiles and Dark Shadow's fists. Ochako panicked and reached up to smack the giant with her zero-gravity, only to have her hand knocked aside when a long, tan horn collided with her wrist. The crowd roared, cheered, and stomped their feet with excitement, a sharp, piercing whistle exploding from the stadium floor. That's the signal. Go, 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 Kendo yelled, her hand chopping through the air. Commence Operation Baby Dog. Manga said. He took a deep breath and spoke at the sky. The Japanese kanji for floaty erupted from his speech bubble head and materialized in physical space. Manga's reality warping quirk causing the impossible to become possible. His words were his will made manifest, and in this case he willed a massive platform into being, one that could float in the air. The floating platform was nothing more than the physical Japanese kanji made literal and physical, but it was enough to serve Yui's needs as a staging ground. The size-changing girl made her move, tilting her body to the side with Izuku still in her grip. Together, they fell off his horse and towards the platform while the audience went wild. Izuku was still affected by Ochako's quirk so he floated down. Yui was having none of that and decided to speed things up with a monstrous, giant-sized punch. The platform shook when Izuku cratered upon its surface, momentarily stunned from the impact. His opponent made a near-perfect superhero landing and strode towards him, casually reaching down to pluck the 10 million points off him like how a child would pluck the wings off a helpless fly. At least, that's what everyone thought would happen. Izuku exploded with movement and backflipped, the tip of his shoe catching her chin and knocking her back. The boy righted himself with a huff, tightening the 10 million point headband before his hands came to a fighting stance. Yui tilted her head, shrinking back to regular size to take on her own kickboxing stance. Izuku grimaced, almost as if he recognized it. No, he definitely did. Yui realized. She knew from the way he watched her legs and hips, already preparing for the incoming roundhouse kick. How did he know? One thing was certain, though. Midoriya Izuku was one of the most interesting people she'd ever met. Bakugo Katsuki was absolutely livid. Some plain-faced bitch had just interrupted his flawless victory over that shitty deku. Unacceptable, absolutely fucking unacceptable. He noticed that for some goddamn reason the losers from the other class were suddenly moving and coordinating together. It was bloody obvious, but it didn't matter. It wasn't like those nobodies could do anything to him. Nothing mattered except the top. A trio of explosions righted his course, the blonde landing in the midst of his team once more. Shitty hair turned back to look at him, a hint of worry in his expression. Dude, Bakugo. You okay? That looked like it hurt. Shut the fuck up. As if some dumb extra is gonna keep me down. Bakugo snarled. We're going after shitty deku again. The rest of you losers just wait here until I get back. You're not going anywhere. Sparky sparky boom boom. He felt the impossible happen when his headband was yanked off. Whirling around, Bakugo came face to face with someone from Class B, immediately giving the other boy the mental moniker of smug bastard with that look on his face. Just what I expected from Class A. An arrogant prick for an arrogant class. Smug bastard said nonchalantly, twirling his headband around like a toy. My. The standards have been lowered to such a point where even someone like you is allowed in the hero course. What a travesty. What the fuck is that supposed to mean, bastard? You know. Smug bastard's eyes were taunting, looking down on him. Some rage-filled brute who throws a tantrum when he doesn't get what he wants. How can you speak to your own team members that way? Shame on you. Let me guess, everything was handed to you since you were young, and now you can't handle the fact that you're not the best? How cliché. Crimson eyes narrowed with fury. Huh? It's plain to see, spiky hair. Smug bastard thought for a moment. Or shitty hair, if you'd prefer. That's what you called your buddy, right? It's funny, really. Don't you two have almost the same hairstyle? The Class B blonde laughed, and Bakugo felt his blood pressure skyrocket. Forget deku, he was going to kill this bastard first. Team Bakugo surged forward and its leader lunged, only to have his hand knocked aside effortlessly. So quick to resort to violence. Are you sure you aren't just a villain in training? You. The words were cut off when an explosion blossomed from smug bastard's palm, knocking Bakugo back, who quickly recovered with an enraged growl. Whoops, my hand slipped. Wah, Bakugo, he's got the same quirk as you. Kirishima yelled. Bakugo ignored him in favor of sending an explosion of his own towards the other blonde, only for it to splash harmlessly off hardened skin. Whoa, he's got mine too? Damn it, does everyone have a hardening quirk these days? Nah. Bakugo snarled, already knowing what the extra's quirk was. This guy's just a fucking copycat. Believe me, yours is nothing special. And neither are you. Smug bastard grinned, lightly swiping his hands atop his team members' heads. You've simply deluded yourself into thinking you are. You're a big fish in a small pond. He exhaled, the air around him shifting with power. It's time you see the ocean. While Monoma was busying himself by distracting Bakugo, Kendo was making plans of her own. She watched as a wave of electricity followed by ice trapped 3 of her class teams along with 2 others from Class A. Frowning at the sheer effectiveness of the combo. Stun and freeze. Clever. Reiko-san. On it, Reiko said, narrowing her tired eyes. An invisible force shattered the ice that was keeping the Class B teams in check, but only the B teams. She could vaguely hear Present Mike yelling about how they were using teamwork and how he couldn't wait to see how things would turn out. Kabura-kun, you alright? She asked, giving him a quick once-over. I'll live. Kabura-sen shivered and shook his head. Let's get this guy. The 2 teams charged towards a scowling Todoroki, the look on his face making it clear that he was annoyed at Ollie's interference between him and those 10 million points. Good, She hoped the anger threw him off. Freezing cold leapt at them from Todoroki's right foot, a crashing wave of frost that advanced like a creeping winter. The wave slowed without warning, seeming to melt into the ground. No, the ground itself was melting. "Nice one, Honanuki-san," Sen cheered to his teammate, the ground restoring itself a moment later. With their path clear and unobstructed, they barreled forward at Todoroki. His points weren't actually that important. The main goal was to show everyone what they were made of by taking them off the number 2's son. That was the real prize. "Yo, Prez," Tetsu asked from beneath her. "How are we gonna get past those ice barriers?" "Use your head," Kendo suggested. Todoroki frowned at his approaching enemies, and another wave of ice rumbled towards them. This time however, they were ready for it. Rebuff overdrive. Sen's gyrating elbow crashed into the solid wall of frost, not enough to fully stop Todoroki's ice. But he didn't need to stop it, he just needed to provide an opening for Kendo. That alone was worth it. To see the look on Mr. Privilege's face when Team Kendo made it past his defense. The redhead clenching a giant fist. A wall of ice sprung into existence, but Tetsu had indeed followed Kendo's suggestion. He used his head. His heavy, steel-plated, unbreakable head was a battering ram that smashed through the ice like a thin sheet of glass. "Yayurozu, Kaminari." "Oi, shock jockey. Your fly's unzipped. Nice pink underwear you're rocking," one of Kendo's teammates yelled out of nowhere. "Hey, it's not pie," Kaminari began, and simply stopped. For a second number 2's son looked bewildered at the lack of electricity. His guard dropped at the assurance that Kaminari's power could stop anything charging at them. They were wrong in that instance. "Got you," Kendo thundered, her fist coming down like a wrecking ball. Todoroki hissed and flung up a hastily constructed shield device, but Kendo bulldozed through it and tore the points off his pretty heterochromatic head. Cheers and gasps from the crowd rippled through the stadium, and present Mike yelled something that they didn't hear. Not with the blood rushing through their ears. This was their moment. It was short-lived when Ida raised his leg, his heavy, engine-equipped leg, bringing his heel down on Kaminari's toes. The electric teen let out a pained yelp, Ida quickly apologizing and draping Momo's insulating sheet over them. Moments later an ice wall circled around Team Kendo and Kaburo, blocking off their escape route. Ah! Reiko, too late. What came next was 5 seconds of pure agony as lightning coursed through the two teams, pain receptor screaming as raw energy crashed into nervous systems, fingers spasming, lungs heaving. "No," Kendo thought, bitter tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "We were so close. Just a bit further." They had been barely within Kaminari's attack range, but it wasn't enough. With Todoroki's ice, Ida's speed, and Momo's ability to create anything she could think of, they were outgunned from the start. But they were not outnumbered or outplanned. The two-man team of Rinhiryu and Shishida Jirota crashed through the ice wall, the latter unleashing a bestial roar that stopped Team Todoroki in its tracks. "Go," Rin yelled to a staggering Sen and Kendo. "Go, we'll hold them off. Regroup with the others." "No you won't," Todoroki said. Ice erupted from the ground. Shishida lashed out with a single hairy paw, shattering the pursuing ice with ease. "Yes they will," Shishida growled. Todoroki's eyes narrowed as he watched the two opposing teams run off with his headband, the irritation clear on his face. He turned to Team Rin, unimpressed. His eyes flickered up to their headband and saw the low point values, a look of cold annoyance forming a split second later. "You're in my way." "I know." "Move," Todoroki demanded, frost creeping up his uniform. "Make me," Rin answered, a covering of green scales rushing down his arm. At the opposite end of the stadium Team Midori landed, the other team simply avoiding them when they noticed the lack of 10 million points and their missing horsemen. Uraka Ochaka looked up at the floating platform that appeared out of nowhere, her expression one of panic. She had undid her quirks effects earlier, knowing her shy friend would need his footing for what came next. The sounds of battle echoed overhead. Deku was fighting with the Ice Queen. Was this a case of a jealous ex, or perhaps a lover's dispute? "We've gotta get up there," Ochaka cried. "Deku-kun's in trouble." "I know. Zenith, overclock Uraka-san's hover boots so we can fly." "Warning, warning. Overclocking will result in increased battery usage. Remaining battery life will. I've done the math. Just do it. May grunted. Uraka-san, make us weightless again. Got it. Team Midoriya held on tight as they rocketed into the air, advancing towards the platform to rescue their leader. But before they could even make it halfway, a pair of tan horns cut through the space atop them like a pair of flying daggers, forcing Ochako to stop ascending lest their formation crumble. Those very same horns circled round for another attack, controlled by an unseen force. May hissed in frustration, the fins on her back flaring out in an intimidating display. Go, funnels! Purple lightning sparked upon the prongs of May's goggles, and the fins, funnels detached themselves from her back and chased after the two horns like a pair of dogfighting planes. Thin beams of energy lanced outward from her devices and smashed the flying horns to bits, freeing their path. But before they could advance upward, a series of thorny vines wrapped around all three of them, grasping and anchoring them to another team. May's funnels sliced at the vines, but no matter how many she cut, more grew back from the wounds to replace them like a beheaded hydra's heads. Keep him busy, guys. I'm heading up. Setsuna smirked. She floated into the air and past them, sending Ochako a triumphant sneer on the way up to the platform. Something hot and ugly twisted in the gravity girl's stomach. Funnel? May shouted. Yay, nah. Another horn smacked into May's funnel and deflected its attack, leaving Setsuna free to ascend towards her target. The wayward beam attack skidded across the invisible energy shields protecting the audience, those nearby screaming with excitement instead of the fear that came with being shot at. Well. Would you look at the menagerie? Tsunotori Pony smiled politely as twin horns floated beside her, two more already regrowing at her temples. A cute little birdie and a pair of tits. Look who's talking, cow. The pink-haired support student shot back. Pony blinked. You can understand me? Speech-to-text interface. May pointed at her goggles. Work in progress. The exchange student let out a low whistle, impressed. Wicked. You're the one with the horns, and you're calling me evil? May raised an eyebrow until Zenith whispered to her. Oh. Whoops. Looks like the translation software could use a little work. The only evil here is the Dark One. A curt voice said from beside Pony, Ochako recognizing her as Shiozaki Iburo, the plant girl. Such wickedness, the darkness itself given form. Truly abhorrent. Now that's just quirkist. Tokoyami grunted with annoyance. I wasn't talking about you, young crow. Shiozaki shook her head. In you, I sense a kind heart. But that thing you wield? It is a creature of the night, an unholy phantom of negativity. Evil incarnate. I'm not evil, I'm just dark. Dark Shadow complained. Damn. Kuro Iroshihai, the third member of Team Setsuna, shook his head sadly. I know that feel, bro. Those who live in the light know nothing of those who live in the dark. Can we all just stop talking and rescue Deku-kun? Ochako yelled, her voice taking a hysterical edge. I'm afraid we can't allow you to do that. Shiozaki tilted her head, a dozen vines branching out behind her. As noble as your goals are, they conflict with ours. Forgive us, but we'll be your opponents. The thorn-haired girl closed her eyes and a web of tangled vines shot towards them like thrown knives. Dark Shadow rushed forward in response, fists flying in a rapid barrage of blows. Rara. The projection roared. It's useless, you can't escape, Shiozaki said calmly, her vines like whips and spears that hammered into Team Midoriya's guard relentlessly. Useless. We'll see about that, May yelled and aimed one of her funnels directly at Shiozaki, only to have the beam's trajectory shift and miss at the last second when one of Pony's horns crashed into it again. Pony recalled the horns, letting them orbit around her head lazily, flashing them a friendly yet competitive smile. The foreign girl looked May right in the eye with a challenging gaze. Let's see which is faster, my horns or your funnels, the American laughed. I feel the need for speed. Midoriya Izuku tightened the 10 million point headband, his gaze steely and cautious. Before him stood Yui Kodai, the girl who looked just like his sister. A part of him had hesitated earlier because she looked like Kiri, and now he ended up trapped on the floating platform. He wasn't sure if he could stop himself from making the same mistake again. Whoa. Team leaders Midoriya Izuku and Yui have gotten off their horses and onto a floating platform. Is that even allowed? Izuku brought his fists up. No. She wasn't Kiri. To even think of her as such would be disrespectful to Yui. She was out here doing her best. What kind of person would he be if he didn't respond in kind? Either way, there was no choice. He had to occupy her while his team made their way back up to the platform. May's jetpack had been damaged by the fall, rendering its thrusters inoperable and stranding him. He could try avoiding Yui, but the speed she'd shown in her tiny form pretty much cancelled that option. It was the same for her. She could focus on just the headband, but she knew he'd catch her. They were aiming to stun each other and make an escape with the headband in possession. Yui's team was probably waiting for her ground side. She had the advantage in this situation. It's allowed as long as both combatants are not touching the stadium floor, which they aren't. That is an artificial platform created by Fukudashi-kun's Quirk, and as the rules stated earlier, Quirk usage is allowed. Plus, they actually bothered to ask me first before the match started. Yui took on her own stance, one that looked all too familiar. Kiri's doppelganger stared at him, arms brought together like a boxer and one foot forward with her heel raised. His eyes flickered to her hips, knowing to watch for the twist. He knew, for that was how Kiri executed it before, a roundhouse kick to the temple that would rock his brain. This girl knew how to fight. His opponent's eyes seemed to narrow just a tiny fraction, and the two combatants surveyed each other carefully. They circled like two lions, scanning for any weaknesses to exploit. Izuku saw how her right arm trembled ever so slightly, a light dusting of soot from May's micro-missiles still remaining. She hadn't gotten off unscathed from May and Tokoyami's combined attack after all. However, she wasn't using the giant form that could crush him easily. Conserving her power, perhaps? It was slower too, because of the increased size. But it shouldn't have been possible in the first place, not according to the square-cube law. As something grows in size, its volume grows faster than its surface area. It was why elephants looked like elephants and not giant mice. Scaling something up simply doesn't work when the correct shape was needed to withstand all that mass. At that size, Yui's bones shouldn't have been able to support her own body weight. How was she doing it? Izuku didn't get an answer when Yui darted forward, breaking line of sight by shrinking. His gaze immediately shot to the ground. The girl moved fast, faster than his eyes could track. In the split second that he lost her, a tiny fist rocketed into his chin, Izuku's head snapping backwards with a surprised grunt. It wasn't even a half second later when something impacted his cheek, sending him sprawling to the right before he made a painful recovery. His straight jab hurtled through the air, but it was like trying to fight a mosquito. Yui landed on his arm and returned to regular size, her lithe legs wrapping around the limb in preparation for a takedown. The girl twisted, but he followed her momentum, tucking and rolling so as to not let her catch him in an arm lock. Before she could react, he braced, lifting up the entirety of her weight with one arm. He could see the brief moment of surprise in her eyes before it passed, with him slamming her back to the ground with a heavy crash. Yui let out a pained gasp when the air was knocked out of her, Izuku growling as he got to top her for a pin. She struggled beneath him, but only for a second before she shrunk herself again. His body lifted off the ground when the brunette launched a brutal handstand kick into his midsection, launching him further into the air than he'd anticipated. Izuku felt the bile on his tongue, the air escaping his body, and his mind spinning with pain. The wind whistled in his ears as they fell, with him looking around frantically. Where? Yui reappeared on his face, still tiny as she drove both feet down into his forehead. He pinwheeled down onto the platform again, crash-landing with a sickening crunch when his face met its surface. Present Mike shouted something, his voice mixed with the ringing in Izuku's ears. The boy immediately got up while still disoriented, seeing red, literally seeing red as blood entered his eyes from a cut on his forehead just below the headband. It was a light wound, but cuts to the forehead tended to bleed a lot, clouding his vision as he staggered blindly. Yui had the advantage here. This was her turf, her battlefield, her tactics. Izuku couldn't help but smile. She was just like Kiri, from her viciousness to her unrelenting advance. It was just like he was fighting his sister. And that's how he knew where she'd be. Izuku's arm shot up to his right shoulder and was rewarded with a soft squeak when he caught Yui preparing to throw another haymaker and steal his headband. That spot was reserved for Kiri, and he didn't appreciate someone else standing in it. Now he had to distract her somehow, lest she break every bone in his hand by returning back to normal size. One for all surged into his arm like a river of pain, preventing her from escaping. He gazed down on her, still smiling. So cute. Yui froze. He took advantage of the momentary distraction to wrench his arm back and fling her tiny body into the ground, an explosion of dust and debris erupting from the impact. But not as cute as my Emoto. The audience roared, half out of anger, half out of wild excitement. How could he be so rough with a girl? Funny, seeing as they had nothing to say when she used his face as a trampoline earlier. In any case, he knew something like that wasn't going to keep her down for long. Izuku backed off and wiped the blood out of his eyes to the best of his abilities, using the 10 million point headband as a makeshift bandage to stem the bleeding. Yui was a cute girl, but to face her with anything less than all of his effort would be a disservice to her. It was something Nana mentioned during his training. He would probably face a female opponent or two in the festival, and that one should respect their opponent regardless of gender or he'd get his ass handed to him. He had finally made peace with the fact and accepted it after the older woman had yelled at him a dozen times. It was why he had little trouble fighting her, a member of the opposite sex. The lesson that he should never underestimate someone because of their gender was also drilled into his head. He'd seen far too many cases of heroes biting the dust because of mistakes like that. He didn't think about how he was a guy and she was a girl. For now, it was just one versus the other. That was the respect he would show to her. Unfortunately, his efforts seemed to have the opposite effect when Yui emerged from the dust cloud, holding a trembling hand to her injured side. Her pupils were narrowed to pinpricks, but not in pain. He knew the look in her eyes, having seen it on Bakugo one too many times, the first of which being that fateful day on the riverbank. Only now did he have an inkling of what it truly meant. She rushed at him, turning giant mid-stride by striking her fingertips together. A whip-like kick punted him into the air, the boy barely managing to guard against the heavy attack. His forearms and shins throbbed, having shielded him from most of the impact when he curled up to tank the blow. Yui didn't waste any time, leaping high like a volleyball player, her giant hands clasping together and preparing for a spike. Her eyes held the same expression as earlier, and Izuku subconsciously made a mental note to talk to her after this. He hated seeing that look, much less on someone he wanted to be friends with. He wanted her to know that was never his intention. Those lovely blue sapphires flashed with anger just before the impact. Stop looking down on me. Her hands came down like a gargantuan sledgehammer, shattering his guard and spiking him with a thunderous crack. Izuku bounced off the ground, an agonized cry escaping his lips involuntarily. Pain knifed in his side, and something broke. He ignored it and got right back up again, finding Yui diving down at him from above in her regular size. Killer move, Yui whispered. Izuku braced himself, feet apart. His fist lanced out with the speed of a thrown javelin, but the girl shrank, twisting midair to dodge and break line of sight again, causing him to miss his jab and the follow-up cross. Tiny dancer. Yui cut through his defenses like a razor through flesh. Her minute form ricocheted off his arm and snapped it back with a kick, following up with a crushing blow into his kneecap to immobilize him. It didn't matter how strong or durable he was, she was small and quick enough to slip through his attacks and hit him where it hurt. Nerve clusters, temples, joints, solar plexus. Each miniature punch from her felt like a bullet, which equated to Izuku getting torn to shreds by her rapid, machine gun strikes. She darted in and out of his guard, bouncing across every part of his body with inhuman speed and striking a vicious blow wherever she landed. White-hot agony blossomed across his form like dozens of bloodied flowers, Izuku gritting his teeth and taking it all. He made sure to guard his throat and jaw. A good hit there would be catastrophic. If it hadn't been for Chen's resistance training, he'd be unconscious by now. Full cow. Thunder crashed. Green lightning filled the air as Izuku somehow managed to focus through the pain, bringing 3% of One for All to the forefront. Izuku clapped and a shockwave of wind pressure blasted Yui off him. She quickly recovered midair, shifting back to normal size and bringing her fingertips together. Giant steps. Yui turned 6 meters tall, towering over him like an impassable wall. An enormous shoe stomped down on Izuku, the boy barely catching the attack in time. A horrific grinding noise filled the air when the ground beneath him cracked, spider webbing and cratering around his feet as Yui started putting more of her weight atop him. It was like trying to lift a truck, and Izuku felt his back howl with pain. Muscles clenched and tendons threatened to snap under that immense force. Lift with your legs, not your back. Johnny's advice came back to him in a flash of clarity, Izuku focusing on his calves and thighs instead. There the two struggled, like the myth of David and Goliath made manifest. A brief moment of hysteria entered his mind and he was back in middle school. Somebody was stepping on him once more and he was surrounded by mocking laughter, disgusted sneers. No. He wouldn't let it happen again. Things were different now. He was no longer Izuku the weakling, Izuku the doormat, no longer just a deku. What can you even do? Yui pushed down, gradually putting her entire weight on him. Bones creaked and teeth rattled. The cloth on Izuku's torso began to rip from One For All's power, the zipper snapping open and exposing his bare chest. Full Cal was somehow breaking past 3% now. He was Midoriya Izuku, son of Midoriya Inko, brother of Midoriya Kirami and Izumi. 9th wielder of One For All and All Might's successor. Friend to Uraka, Ochako and Ida Tenya. He wasn't a nobody anymore. Without power, can one become a hero? No, I should think not. The earth beneath his feet ruptured, deep cracks spreading across the entire platform. Yui kept forcing him down, her giant body trembling from the effort. Izuku held the weight of the world on his shoulders. He never wanted to let anyone walk all over him ever again. Deku. His deku meant you can do it. Why don't you take a swan dive off the roof? He never wanted to feel that way ever again. Every man, woman and child in the audience watched with bated breath as the green-haired boy pushed against the unstoppable force of a titan. The cameras rolled, broadcasting the scene nationwide, even worldwide in some cases. Lightning crackled around him and the boy growled with effort. Present Mike was screaming into the microphone. Come on, Izuku. The weight was unbearable. It stopped being comparable to a truck long ago. Now it was like trying to hold up a collapsing building. Sweat rolled down his chest, a high-pitched ringing rushing through his ears. He tasted iron in his mouth, vision blurring as his eyes stopped focusing. Waves of agony pulsed along his ribs, ragged breaths hissing through clenched teeth. Lightning raced up his spine from the Herculean effort. He could do this. Push it. Overcome it. Go beyond his limits. Come on, Izuku. Yui was breathing harder too. He could hear her panting heavily. Probably because she couldn't hold the giant form for too long, a part of his mind told him. The other remaining parts were too busy screaming at him. He thought of the people who supported him, believed in him. Uraka, Ida, Hatsume, Tokoyami, All Might, Kiri, Mimi. Mom. Come on, Izuku. You better, he snarled, raw power surging through him. Yui's eyes widened as Izuku did the impossible. Step off. With a great effort he pushed, throwing Yui off him with a mighty roar. She landed on her back with an enormous crash, the Goliath clutching the back of her head in pain when it hit the ground. Present Mike's screaming reached a crescendo, barely audible over the audience's excited howling. Izuku didn't let up. He worked with the momentum he'd gotten, launching himself at Yui's face with his entire body. One good strike to the temple or jaw was all he needed to take her down, or disorient her at the very least. Without her chasing him, he could retreat off the platform to his hopefully waiting team. The giant girl swiped at him and he twisted midair to copy her earlier movement, the attack glancing off him but sending his body spinning chaotically. Izuku's vision swam, dizziness clouding his thoughts as he spun through the air. Still, he managed to remember the lesson he'd been taught, focusing on his right leg. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. Was this how Mimi did it, working with the rotation instead of against it? Close enough. At this range, he wouldn't miss. 3% Manchester Smash. His lightning-clad heel raced down towards Yui's nose and aimed to stun her, but instead of hitting soft cartilage it stopped with a resounding thump. Izuku tried to understand what he was looking at, only seeing two disembodied hands that had somehow stopped his attack. Nothing made sense anymore. Oi, geek boy. A shiver ran down his spine. Before he could react, 6 uneven shapes smashed into him from every direction, forcing him away from Yui. Izuku's fingers dug into the ground to slow the knockback, leaving a trail of 5 deep gouges in the space between them. Setsuna Tokage entered the fray, shark-like teeth bared and glinting in the light. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" she declared. Uraka Ochako was panicking. How could she not, when the situation was currently going belly up in the sea of chaos that was the cavalry battle? Above her, deku was being cornered by 2 opponents, outnumbered and alone. The more pressing concern was the team below that tethered them down, stopping them from reaching their beloved leader. Dark Shadow lashed out, his ethereal claws striking and parrying against whip-like emerald vines. Both Tokoyami and Shiozaki wore looks of pained concentration, focusing on wearing each other down. The air around them was filled with energy beams and speeding keratin, May dogfighting with Pony via their proxy weapons. Pony's horns were faster, but May countered with that ranged beam attack, which was in turn countered by the revelation that the blonde could grow her horns back. No matter how many the Tinker shot down, Pony always seemed to have more, adamant on continuing their aerial battle until May ran out of power. The enemy was aiming to exhaust all of Team Midoriya. Ochako looked around helplessly. What could she do to help? Her quirk required physical contact, but there was no way the opposing team was going to let her touch them. Then they still needed to disengage and make their way back to Deku, or they could do both at the same time. Her thoughts were interrupted when one of Shiozaki's vines cracked like a whip only inches away from her head, the brunette already formulating a plan in response. "Kurohiro-kun," Shiozaki cried. "Gotcha!" The teen with jet black skin managed to raise his hand to catch Dark Shadow's fist, and Ochako's eyes narrowed. No, his hand was sinking into Dark Shadow, the projection suddenly stiffening. "Can't move." Dark Shadow managed. Was Kurohiro's quirk the power to manipulate darkness? It didn't matter, not when a spiraling spear of tangled vines was headed right at Tokoyami. Ochako reached forward and slapped the vines, curving them away from their intended target when they were no longer bound by gravity. She wouldn't just sit there and do nothing while everyone was doing their best. Ochako felt the effects of her zero-gravity traveling down those vines and into Shiozaki. She had the pleasure of watching the other girl's eyes widen in panic, her entire team also floating off the ground. Full power. The hover boots on Ochako's feet rumbled with activity and roared like a runaway diesel. The gadget pushed beyond its default settings by May's overclocking. Team Midoriya shot into the air, dragging Team Setsuna behind them while they ascended. "Tsunotori-san," Kurohiro yelled. "I know. Fly, my pretties." Shiozaki herself seemed to be frozen with terror, Ochako quickly realizing that the serious girl had a fear of heights. To her shock, Shiozaki simply closed her eyes for a second before glaring at them with a newfound determination, a sort of bravado having ignited within the defiant gaze. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," the thorn-haired girl declared with trembling lips, an array of vines fanning out behind her, "I shall fear no evil." "That's 'cause you're the baddest bitch in the goddamn valley," Kurohiro whooped, slamming his skull against Tokoyami's when the two Chunibya butted heads. "Go get 'em, sister." The vines increased their speed twofold, a few even interrupting the dogfight between Pony and May. A horn blurred with speed, aiming right at May through the distraction. The Tinker shifted just in time for the projectile to graze the side of her head, shearing off the right side of her goggles but leaving the pink-haired girl unharmed. May was wearing half her goggles now, her furious right eye exposed for all to see. "My baby!" she shrieked, knuckles whitening around Tokoyami's shoulder. "That's it, I've had enough. Zenith, roll out Killbox 1 Alpha." Killbox 1 Alpha, preparing for takeoff. "Takeoff." Her little robot chirped. Steam hissed from shifting metal as her chest armor started to transform. "Please confirm activation phrase." "Laser beak, eject." May howled. Izuku's mind disassembled the situation before him into its simplest components, compartmentalizing the sheer screw-up he found himself in. 10 million points. 2 opponents. Keep away. Delay. Retreat unavailable. Await reinforcements. Hold your ground. His heart hammered in his chest, a quick analysis revealing what he was up against. On one side was Yui, who had returned to normal size, the girl taking slow, heavy breaths to calm herself. Super strength in both forms. Super speed when she's small, super durability when she's big. No noticeable change when in normal size so far. His eyes flickered over Setsuna, remembering those floating hands that stopped his attack earlier. What was that? A projection or a copy of her body? No, it had something to do with her body parts. Was her quirk like Shoji's, allowing her to grow extra limbs? Look at what we have here. Setsuna smirked as Yui got up and dusted herself off. Her eyes flickered over Izuku's bare torso. Looks like Broccoli Boy ain't just a string bean. Izuku's only response was to swirl the blood in his mouth before spitting it out at his feet, in too much pain to notice his open shirt or whatever she was talking about. The girl's grin grew even wider. Ready to give up? Setsuna crowed, her posture confident and unafraid. Just hand over the headband and this'll all be over soon. Unless you want another beating, but perhaps you'd like that? Hey! The boy rolled his shoulders, ignoring the sharp pain in his side when he brought his arms up. He couldn't afford to lose here, not when the hopes and dreams of 3 others rested on his shoulders. The 10 million point headband felt wet, dyed a deep red by the wound it was keeping pressure on. I can do this all day. Izuku breathed, arms held close like a boxer. Yui's eyes flashed with something different than the anger from before. A quiet respect for a fellow warrior. She flexed her fingers, preparing to engage once again. Look what we have here, Kodai-san. A stallion, a real stud, Setsuna laughed, putting a hand on her hip. Let's see how long you can last against the 2 of us. Izuku increased his guard, teeth gritting. He would be ready for whatever they did next. Yui and Setsuna took off their jackets, revealing a white t-shirt and a black tank top respectively. Okay, he had not been ready for that. He vaguely understood what they were doing. Yui's jacket was soaked with sweat, so she wanted to lose some weight, while Setsuna probably wanted more freedom of movement with her quirk. So why did it feel so wrong? Look all you want, geek boy. The green-haired girl smirked, catching him staring. Cause we're the last thing you'll see today before we knock your damn lights out. Wide emerald eyes were inadvertently drawn to the creamy, sweat-slicked skin of his 2 opponents and even an exposed midriff in Setsuna's case. Even after everything, Izuku was still a young, hormonal teenager, the boy blushing helplessly in response. In fact, he was the type of guy who would get hot and bothered by just seeing a girl's bare shoulders. A part of him chastised him for not taking this seriously, but he couldn't help but want to look. They were, after all, very attractive girls that were his age. A fair bit of shame welled up in him as well, for finding Yui attractive despite her being a doppelganger of his younger sister. That, and he was pretty sure the words "really pretty" weren't supposed to be the first thing that came to mind about someone who had just brutalized him a minute ago. He supposed it was a result of his acknowledgement that she was a completely different person. "Aight," Setsuna announced, tying her jacket around her waist. Yui simply held hers. "Get ready for a pounding, broccoli boy," Izuku said, the first thing that came to his delirious mind, still shaking himself out of that hormone-induced stupor and remembering Nana's teachings to hide fear with humor. The only ones who'll be getting a pounding are the 2 of you. Oh god, was that the best comeback he could think of? Yui's expressionless face turned a warm pink, and even Setsuna wore an embarrassed scowl. "Yeah, I bet you'd like that," the long-haired girl grumbled. Izuku didn't get a chance to contemplate further when she flung out both arms, each limb segmenting into 3 different parts. At first he didn't quite understand what he was looking at, watching her disembodied fists float into the air. It clicked when one of them slugged him across the face, sending him reeling back and clutching his nose. Setsuna's quirk allowed her to detach and remotely control her body parts, turning herself into a whirlwind that descended on Izuku like a murder of crows. Full cowl sparked and shuddered, the boy leaping backward until a flash of blue at the corner of his eye made him turn to face the new threat. A giant blanket of cloth was thrown over him. Where the hell did they get that, blocking his vision? The girl's gambit worked. Izuku too distracted to notice the 3 different lumps of flesh slamming into him. A giant fist hammered into him next, knocking him away. Adrenaline raced through his veins, dulling the pain. His opponents advanced, one fast and light, the other slow and heavy. Their teamwork was remarkable. He had to keep one eye on Setsuna's rapid movements, but the moment he did, Yui's attack would come down on him like the fist of an angry god. If he focused too much on Yui, Setsuna would tear him to pieces. With her pieces, that giant cloth is Kodai-san's jacket. Is her quirk the power to change the size of whatever she touches? Wait, she can probably only change the size of other things when she's in her regular form. Now she's smaller than before. That giant form has its own limits. A knee, elbow, and fist smashed into Izuku from 3 different directions. His head dipped just in time for her other fist to miss his headband, snatching at empty air. The floating torso that was Setsuna Dokage growled, her pretty face scrunching up in frustration. Dokage-san's quirk allows her to split and control her body. Each blow isn't that painful, but they add up. Instead of a meaty cross-section, there's only a black void in those floating parts. It might be some sort of space warping quirk. Fascinating. Unlimited angles of attack, perfect as a distraction. Her shin smashed into his, causing him to wince and nearly tripping him. He barely managed to dodge another ground pound from Yui, the shockwave throwing up a cloud of dust. Case in point. But Izuku wasn't just going to stand there and take it. He stuck his right arm around his back and a 3% Delaware smash exploded from his hand in an unexpected angle, nailing Yui in the gut. Momentum and recoil spun him, his left elbow wheeling about and crashing into Setsuna's cheek to stun both girls simultaneously. The sharp-toothed girl let out a grunt of pain, but he knew it wasn't enough, so he flipped her over his shoulder in a judo throw that Misha had taught him. Setsuna split in 2 at the apex of his throw, her torso went left, legs skidding right. A foot and fist hammered into his guard from 2 opposite angles. Fighting her was like fighting multiple people. Yui stomped, driving her heel into the ground. The resulting tremor was enough for Izuku to lose his footing, enough for 2 massive hands to clamp around his entire body. Setsuna's hands and feet had been knocked away, but one part of her could still grab her objective. The girl headbutted him with her floating head, sharp teeth biting down on the headband. 10 million points were torn off with a victorious grunt. The audience howled. "No, hold him, Kodai-san." Setsuna made to retreat, only to stop in her tracks when something darted through the air and nearly crashed into her. Laser Beak opened fire, a thin line of purple energy from its mouth striking Setsuna in the neck and causing her to cry out in pain, dropping the headband off the platform. "Midoriya-kun." May's voice squawked from the mechanical falcon. Docking mode. Setsuna dived after the headband, and Izuku knew there was no time to waste. One for all thundered through his limbs, forcing Yui's hands apart as he reached for a button on the jetpack. This was the hidden function that May had mentioned earlier. He could dock with Laser Beak and divert all his power to fly in the event that the jetpack malfunctioned. She'd been saving it for an emergency, but he supposed this qualified. The boy leapt off the platform and there was a click atop his back and the vibration of shifting gears, a pair of metallic wings spreading out with a glorious clang. Izuku soared downward, rocketing after the lizard girl. They crashed midair, Setsuna letting out a scream of fury at the untimely return of her opponent. He snarled and reached for the headband wrapped around her neck. She bared her teeth and detached her hands to target his fragile, hollow wings, twisting and pulling. They were truly a sight to behold, 2 teenagers fighting tooth and nail over a piece of cloth with some numbers on it. Team Midoriya appeared from nowhere, dragging Team Setsuna behind them as they headed straight at the pair. May no longer had both her funnels, holding the one remaining, barely functional device like a handgun. Both leaders called out to their teams. "Pony-chan, get up here and get this asshole off me." "Shoot her, Hatsume-san." "Shoot her." Speeding Keratin sprang from Pony like striking vipers, but May was ready, sniping them out of the air before they could get to Izuku. Setsuna split herself again, swirling around Izuku and smashing into him from every direction. "Targeting system malfunction, malfunction," Zenith announced. The Tinker's hand trembled, her weapon's barrel shifting while she tried to get a bead on her target. "I've only got one round left," May yelled at the rapidly distancing struggle. "I can't get a clear shot." "Then hit me if you have to," Izuku roared. Golden reticles for pupils widened. May took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. A purple streak of energy hissed through the air. Exotic particles compressed together into a beam that carried kinetic energy, punching through Izuku's fluffy hair and straight into Setsuna's chest. The green-haired girl let out a pained cry, but not before wrenching her hands backward and snapping Izuku's light-weight robotic wings. Izuku snatched the headband off her neck as he fell and screaming erupted in the stands. He felt like an angel cast out of heaven, broken wings fluttering behind him. "Deku-kun, Uraka!" Ochako cried out, her hand reaching out for him. The memories of his brother echoed in a melancholic whisper. "Take my hand." Izuku reached out, fingertips brushing against Ochako's, not enough for her to grab onto him, but enough for her to use her quirk. Zero gravity raced across the boy's body in a pink glow, Ochako managing to drag her friend back into her arms. Dark Shadow managed to sever the vines binding them with a screech of victory. "I've got you!" Ochako wailed, holding him tight. "I've got you!" The audience exploded with cheers and whoops. Team Midoriya was back in action. They landed, seeking to get as far away as possible from Team Setsuna, especially considering how pissed off she seemed at the moment. Luckily for them, the other team was stranded in the air, or at least until Pony could regrow her horns and guide them back onto solid ground. "You shot me in the boot. Why, you little—" Izuku pretended he didn't hear that, instead glancing at all three of his teammates. "Thank you. Uraka-san, Hatsume-san, Tokoyami-san." Izuku choked, wrapping the headband around him once more. I can't. Thank you enough." "We're not out of the woods yet," Tokoyami said curtly when they landed. They weren't. A glacial wall erupted from the ground around them, forcing the team to back off. On their left, Team Todoroki appeared, their rider's breath cold with frost. An ice-covered headband with low-point values were clutched in his right hand. Fire and smoke boomed on their right. Team Bakugo emerged from shattered ice and strewn debris, the blonde rider snarling like a mad dog while he tied a new headband around his neck. Behind them a third team landed, Izuku's eyes widening at the realization that they were surrounded. This was why May had been so adamant on saving up Laserbeak as an emergency. Now they had no way to fly as the hoverboots had run out of power. Team Kendo landed with a thump, their rider glancing at the headbands Todoroki and Bakugo were fiddling with. "Hiryu-kun, Monoma-kun. Your sacrifices will not be in vain," Kendo said through clenched teeth. That seemed to be the signal as all three opposing teams moved in, all at once. Team Midoriya braced themselves. Dark Shadow roared a challenge. Ochako brought up a hand, and Maid attached one of Laserbeak's wings to use as a sword, handing the other to Izuku for the same. Full Cowl failed to activate for Izuku and he felt his heart drop before quickly deciding it didn't matter. He would fight with his bare hands if he had to. "Fucking Deku!" An explosion sheared Dark Shadow away, the projection letting out a scream of pain from the blinding light. Bakugo was fast, too fast, but Kaminari's electricity was faster. It raced across the field and up their bodies, thousands of volts causing muscles to lock up and spasm. The inside of Izuku's mouth filled with the taste of metal. Team Kendo had backed off just out of range, not falling for the same trap twice. Ice rushed up the stunned team's legs, Todoroki ripping the bloodied headband off a wheezing Izuku. 7 seconds left. Bakugo recovered almost immediately, a string of curses escaping his throat. Izuku tried to move but the beating from Yui and Setsuna had left him weak, injured. Darkness crept along the edge of his vision and the boy felt like he was about to collapse. Dark Shadow reached down and smashed the ice, his fingers working like pickaxes. A fourth team exploded from the ice wall, its riders' arms spinning like drills. "Kabura-kun. Left side, even side." Kendo pointed a giant finger at Team Todoroki. "Now, handle it." Gra. Sen charged, his whirling fists slamming into Yaoyorozu's ice-covered kite shield. Overdrive. Kaminari. We. 5. The flames of an explosion surged against unyielding frost on Team Todoroki's right. Bakugo carved away at the ice, but more kept springing up from nowhere. The heterochromatic teen's face twisted with effort, pinched between two opponents and sinking into the ground from somebody's quirk. Something had to break, and eventually, it did. The ice gave way, and Bakugo snatched up the 10 million points with a victorious roar. "Hand it over, that thing," a member of Team Kendo commanded. "Your 10 million points. In your dreams, loser. Go fuck yourself," Bakugo began and froze mid-sentence. 4. Toss that headband onto the ground, the purple-haired boy ordered, and to their shock Bakugo did so. "Reiko-san, would you do the honors?" "Gladly." Reiko smiled devilishly. The headband and a cleanly cut chunk of ground it was on floated into the air towards Team Kendo, Reiko's quirk too risky to use on a precision target. "No," Izuku cried, his team skidding as they struggled against their own momentum to reorient themselves towards Team Kendo. 3. "Yes. It's all ours." The purple-haired boy, the Gen Ed student who had stood in front of the 1A classroom, smirked with glee as Kendo claimed the headband. "All your efforts, wasted. How does it feel, I wonder?" The world slowed, Izuku blanking out. He could vaguely feel his team rushing out and see Dark Shadow surging forward, but everything was moving in slow motion. He couldn't budge an inch, petrified by the other boys' power. They were going to lose. In the Garden of Paradise, the wielders of One for All just had their barbecue party interrupted by an unwelcome guest. 7 pairs of eyes stared up at the massive hole that had opened up in the sky, hamburger patties temporarily forgotten. A gigantic purple serpent slithered through, 6 slitted pupils gazing down at the tree that represented Izuku's soul. "What is that?" Johnny asked, his eyes disbelieving. He ripped off his Kiss the Cook apron in one smooth motion. "What the hell is that?" "What is that, Private Mutt?" "When? I dunno, when?" Coco barked from beside him, before shifting into human form and clashing her fists together. "But it looks like a big snakey. And that means it's bad, right?" "Wait," someone yelled. Coco halted her charge, leaving a trail of claw marks in the cobblestone path. But big monster. "Don't attack it yet, we have no idea what will happen to Midoriya-kun if," Nana began. The serpent coiled around Izuku's tree and sank its fangs into it. Nana's eyes burned with anger. "Get that motherfucker," she declared. Everyone sprang into action. Guns and quirks fired, the phantoms defending their new home and host with all of their power. "You!" Coco snarled, red lightning crackling along her arm as she closed in and prepared to punch the serpent. "You are huge. That means you have huge guts. Rip and tear. RIP and tear your guts." 2 translucent images of the 8 remaining One for All members appeared in Izuku's sight, overlapping across his vision. They looked around in confusion until Coco noticed him, waving happily. "Masta. There was a big snaky in your head, but I punched it really hard, and so did everyone else, and it went away. And we've got your back, young Midoriya." Nana interrupted, getting right up in his face. "Go get him, kid." The ghostly phantoms faded and Izuku was back in reality again, finding his team charging directly at Team Kendo. He could hear Bakugo behind him, the crack of his explosions only a few meters away from them. Ice erupted around them like frozen spears. Izuku's hand lashed out at Kendo's neck, at 10 million points. 1 and missed. Kendo deflected his wild swing effortlessly, but his fingers caught cloth, the headbands of other teams, but not the one he wanted. He pulled anyway, right before Kendo could follow up with a jab that would break his face. A part of him marveled at the movements she was using. Chen's water stream rock smashing fist had survived even after all these years. "Time's up." The ice stopped, and there was a heavy thud as Bakugo fell flat on his face. Izuku didn't even turn to look, his mind numbed from failure. He failed. He couldn't hear what Midnight, Present Mike, or what his team said next as he dismounted. Glancing at his shaking hand, he counted the points from the headbands he'd taken. It was so little, so very little compared to the 10 million point lead they held throughout the battle. They had managed to hold that lead only to trip at the finish line. In first place, Team Kendo. In second place, Team Todoroki. In third place, Team Bakugo. The bottom of Izuku's heart just dropped. He'd failed, not only himself, but everyone. The hopes and dreams of 3 other people had been resting on his shoulders and he let them down. All Might wanted him to show the world what he could do and he let him down. Everyone from One for All had put in the time and effort to train him, and he had failed. Carrie and Mimi wanted to see him win, and he failed. He let them down. Pathetic little creature. You're an inferior defect, a mistake, a failure. That's all you were, that's all you will ever be. Weak and unwanted. The sobs threatened to escape through clenched teeth, but Izuku pushed them back. Do not cry, he told himself. Crying won't solve anything. It was time to face the music. He turned to his team, an apology already on his lips. Everyone. I'm so sorry, Izuku said weakly. It's okay, you did your best. Ochako smiled. Besides, I think that someone's got a little surprise for you. May looked up from the piece of laser beak she was holding. Don't look at me, the only surprise I've got is how much time it'll take to repair my baby. Gah, look what she did to it. Repair. Zenith squeaked helpfully. Izuku turned to Tokoyami and Dark Shadow. You fought well, Midoriya-kun. For that I must commend you. It is no easy feat to hold your ground against 2 opponents, no matter how inexperienced they might be. Nevertheless, this has been quite the eye-opening experience. The crow boy tilted his head at Dark Shadow, who held something in his mouth. I was able to get one. I took the one on her head, where her guard had been weakest in the opening you had created in that last final spurt. It couldn't be. Could it? In 4th place, Team Midoriya. A single tear. That much was allowed, right? Okay, maybe more than just a single one. Izuku smiled with relief, feeling a weight lift off his heart. Leaning forward, he patted both Dark Shadow and Tokoyami on their shoulders. Thank you, he choked. All of you. Izuku turned back to Ochako and May, his expression one of pure gratitude. Thank you. His eyes rolled up to the back of his head, and the last thing he saw before he fainted was his 3 teammates moving to catch him. 3 pairs of hands held him up, a warmth he'd never felt before surging through his chest. Ah, he realized. So this is what camaraderie feels like. Chapter 11 End. Notes. Thank you for reading.